After being publicly shamed for having no mana, Klein is confronted by his arrogant cousin Dalton. He sneers that a direct descendant with no power is nothing but a disgrace to the prestigious Rhineland name. But Klein calmly retorts, exposing his cousin's secret dalliances behind the ballroom. Stunned that his secret is out, Dalton furiously lunges at him. With a simple, almost lazy movement, Klein sidesteps the clumsy attack and effortlessly trips his aggressor, sending Dalton crashing face first onto the polished floor. Utterly humiliated, Dalton screams a vicious insult, calling Klein a bastard who doesn't even know his own mother. The insult strikes a nerve, and Klein's demeanor instantly shifts to a cold fury that terrifies his cousin. His eyes glow with a dark power, hinting at a secret rage and a past life he can't escape. It is the memory of his own death, a nightmare from a life he's already lost. But for this reincarnated villain, every nightmare is followed by a new dawn. After a decade of bloodshed, the Great Continental War finally reaches its climax. At its heart, the infamous Necromancer Archimonde stands cornered and defeated. Before him is the hero who brought him down, Burkle Rhineland, leader of the Northern Night Order. When the knight speaks of peace, Archimonde erupts, screaming of their hypocrisy. Even on the brink of death, he channels his immense power for one last act of defiance. But Burkle reminds him of the 20 million souls he enslaved to build his undead army. The Necromancer merely scoffs, accusing the hero of acting not for justice, but for personal revenge. Yet Burkle's true motivation leaves him utterly speechless. He fights not for the past, but for the future, for the sake of my descendants. With those words, the devil of the continent's will is finally broken. But as Burkle prepares the final blow, Archimonde offers a chilling, cryptic smile. With one swift strike, the hero ends the Necromancer's reign of terror. And so, after 10 long years, the war was finally over. But for Archimonde, death was not the end. He awakens in an infant's body, reborn as young Master Klein. When his new caretakers try to coax out his first word, his ancient instincts take over. Instead of mama, he instinctively recites a dark summoning incantation. A bolt of lightning cracks the sky, sealing his disastrous fate in this strange new life. 15 years pass in the blink of an eye. The boy Klein has grown into a strikingly handsome, yet aloof young man. But his peaceful day is ruined by a sudden, holy ambush. This is Garrison Veerman, a fanatical priest obsessed with the idea that Klein is possessed. For years, he has made it his personal mission to purify the evil spirit of Archimonde from Klein's body. And Klein can only endure the endless, maddening rituals. His fate was sealed by his disastrous first words. At just 3 years old, he was locked away in a monastery and met the man who would become his personal tormentor. He was subjected to ridiculous purification baths, and even mock crucifixions, all in the name of God. Now, 15 years into his new life, the humiliation continues. His personal maid, Erin, prays for him, completely unaware of who he used to be. Fed up with the ridiculous party hat, Klein finally snaps. But just as he apologizes, Erin reveals the hat was a handmade gift from Priest Garrison. The former devil of the continent stares at the childish hat with a new kind of horror. When the priest appears, feigning emotion, Klein gives him a sweet smile before viciously tearing the cursed object to shreds. Their squabble is interrupted by the arrival of Captain Dunkel of the Night Order. Instantly, Garrison's demeanor flips, becoming a perfect gentleman as he drops Klein to the floor. As he leaves, the priest gives Klein a chilling threat, reminding him the evil spirit could always return. And with a cheerful wave, he promises to see him for the next ritual on Friday. Klein collapses, utterly exhausted by his unending battle with the fanatical priest. Erin innocently asks the one question he can never answer truthfully. Is he really Archimonde? He knows that if Garrison ever learned his secret, his life would become a true hell. But then Dunkel reveals a shocking fact about the priest. Garrison isn't just any priest, he holds the title of Proxy. He is the strongest individual in the entire Holy Order, an unmatched and formidable power. The conversation shifts to the powerful dukes of Klein's own family, and he declares the first was the strongest of all. He repeats his claim with an unshakable, almost personal conviction. Klein stares at a portrait on the wall, the 200 years that have passed finally sinking in. His new family, the Great House of Rhineland, has a long and storied lineage. A lineage founded by none other than the first Duke, Burkle Rhineland. He had been reborn into the bloodline of the very man who killed him. In a vivid nightmare, the Necromancer Archimonde relives his final moments, screaming the name of his nemesis, Burkle. Facing him, the hero Burkle Rhineland stands resolute amidst the chaos, declaring the reason for their confrontation. With unwavering conviction, he declares that he fights not for glory but for the future of the children. The hero's sword descends in a final, decisive blow that ends the reign of the devil of the continent. Suddenly, Klein Rhineland gasps, waking violently from the traumatic memories of his past life. Catching his breath in his opulent bedroom, he struggles to separate the dream from his new reality. But he dismisses the crappy dream, inwardly reminding himself of his true identity as Archimod, the one and only Necromancer. He recalls how, in his past life, he was consumed by rage and ultimately cut down by Berkel Rhineland's sword. And he reflects on the cruel irony of his reincarnation, awakening 200 years later as a descendant of the very man who killed him. Even with all his memories of being a powerful necromancer intact, he still can't get used to the silver hair of his new body. Just then, a looming figure appears in his doorway, coolly remarking on how heavily he talks in his sleep. Priest Garrison enters, knowingly asking if Klein was dreaming of his days as Archimod again, a man our protagonist mentally curses as a crazy torturer. Recognizing the danger, Klein decides his best strategy is to play dumb in front of the fanatical priest. Feigning exhaustion, he tries to brush off the priest's suspicions while his maid, Erin, hides behind him. However, his attempt is foiled when she bursts forward, excitedly proclaiming that she heard every word of her young master's sleep-talking. Erin enthusiastically reenacts his villainous monologue about destroying the continent, much to his frantic denial. Their chaotic morning is interrupted by Butler Veerman, who announces that the family's swordsmanship demonstration is about to begin. Hearing the damning report, Garrison's eyes burn with holy fire as he decides Klein will need double the usual purification rituals. Klein groans in despair, clamping a hand over his tattletale maid's mouth a second too late. Internally, he screams at the absurdity of his situation, cursing the crazy priest. The scene shifts to the sprawling and magnificent Rhineland estate, where the demonstration is to be held. On their way to the main hall, Klein questions why he was summoned to a swordsmanship demonstration. Butler Veerman informs him that his father, the Duke, has personally requested his attendance this time. He is taken aback that his father specifically called for him, a rare occurrence, while Erin sweetly asks for his cookie. The butler scolds her for her impertinence, but our protagonist calmly tells him to let it go. He then indulges his maid, handing her the snack which she happily devours, leaving the butler speechless. Pressing for more information, he asks why his father has suddenly summoned him to a demonstration for the first time ever. The butler explains that the unusual summons is because members of the Branch family have arrived. The mention of the Branch families gives him a moment of pause, as he anticipates trouble, that some annoying pests have arrived. His cousins jeer at him, mockingly calling him Lord Archimod. He identifies his father's maternal cousins, who gossip loudly about his 7-year confinement in a monastery. Then he spots the gluttonous relatives from the northern branch, who seem to have only come for the food. His gaze also falls upon the western cousins, who mostly keep to themselves, and identifies that the girl is definitely one of them. As he surveys the room, he overhears one of his relatives note that he seems to be out of earshot. Soon after, a cousin accosts him directly, questioning the presence of someone like him in the prestigious Rhineland family. When they shout at him for ignoring his elders, Klein coldly questions their use of the term, our family. He dismisses them entirely, stating he doesn't even remember their names and reflecting that their arrogance is a symptom of the family's decline, and concludes that the fact these branch relatives can look down on a direct descendant proves the family is falling apart. Meanwhile, the swordsmanship demonstration is underway, with a blonde swordsman easily deflecting his opponent's strike. The purple-haired combatant Dalton shouts the name of his superior opponent in frustration, "Dellin, you bastard." Dalton is swiftly knocked to the floor by the relentless assault of his opponent, Dellin. Just then, Dellin shouts at him to stop holding back and fight him properly, and calmly declares the match over, effortlessly parrying his cousin's desperate, wild swings. Watching from above, Klein recognizes that any hope left for the Rhineland family rests solely on the shoulders of his talented older half-brother. This prodigy is Dellin Rhineland, who sighs that his opponent's persistence is becoming problematic. Our protagonist watches on, acknowledging that his brother's skill is the only thing holding the family's prestigious reputation together. Down below, Dalton lunges forward with a renewed battle cry, determined to make this attack count. Watching intently, Klein's eyes glow with purple energy as he realizes this is his first time truly witnessing swordsmanship in his new life. With practiced ease, Dellin dodges the attack, letting the wooden sword swing harmlessly past him. Then, channeling a surge of green mana, he bursts forward with incredible speed. As if seeing the world in slow motion, Klein's analytical eyes begin to deconstruct the entire technique. He perfectly perceives every nuance of his brother's movements, from the precise footwork to the timing of each step. Dalton turns, his face a mask of shock and anger as he realizes he has been completely outmaneuvered. Klein's analysis goes deeper, even allowing him to see the flawless flow of mana coursing through Dellin's body. With this, Dellin unleashes the family's secret technique, the Meteor Sword, ending the duel with a single, powerful swing of his sword. Since Dalton is weaponless, the one-sided duel is officially over. Dylan calmly remarks to his defeated cousin that he had warned him it would be problematic to continue. The crowd of relatives murmurs in awe, impressed that he could pull off the legendary meteor sword technique so flawlessly. While the onlookers believe the display was a calculated show of force, Klein simply feels an odd sensation in his eye. Suddenly, Dylan calls out to him from the demonstration floor. Surprised to be noticed, Klein listens as his brother wishes he had known his little brother was watching. Dylan flashes a charming smile, claiming he would have tried even harder if he knew Klein was in attendance. Klein recognizes his brother as the perfect specimen, but shifts his focus, wondering why the parasitic branch family has shown up again. But his thoughts are interrupted by their father, Heinkel Rhineland, praising Dylan's excellent work. Heinkel, the seventh head of the Rhineland family, proudly commends his eldest son for having already mastered their ancestral technique. Dylan greets him respectfully, a man Klein recognizes as the current head of the family he was unfortunately born into. With a look of paternal pride, Heinkel tells his eldest son he must have worked incredibly hard to achieve such a feat. A protagonist observes the scene, understanding that Dylan's talent is his father's final source of pride for the struggling family. Even Dunkel, Klein's escort knight, is impressed, remarking that Dylan's mana and precision are signs of overwhelming talent. Dylan humbly brushes off the praise, saying it's still not enough, just as his father calls his name, and recites the dying words of their ancestor, Berkel Rhineland, reminding Dylan that a Rhineland must always be the greatest knight. He urges his son to engrave those words in his heart, and Dylan gratefully accepts his father's guidance. After praising his prized son, he turns his attention to his other child, calling out to Klein. Klein stands silently, a bead of sweat running down his temple as he anticipates his father's words. His father places a hand on his head, his voice filled with gentle disappointment as he states he still can't feel any mana from him. Klein apologizes, knowing that this lack of potential means he is now seen as nothing more than a worthless burden to his father. Dunkel attempts to defend him, suggesting his years confined to a monastery are to blame for his lack of development. The branch family members begin to whisper amongst themselves, gossiping about how the second son has no mana, unlike his brilliant brother. Their whispers grow bolder, with some concluding that the direct line is incompetent and that it's time for the branch family to take over. Ignoring the insults directed at him, Klein walks away, his thoughts turning to the family's heroic founder, Berkel. He recalls Berkel's noble last words, his vow to fight for the children's future. A cold fury builds within him as he looks at his pathetic relatives, questioning if this is who Berkel truly sacrificed his life for. As his father and brother depart, Dylan waves a cheerful goodbye to him. But his pleasant mood is shattered when Dalton Cornwell approaches from behind, mocking the young lord who can't even wield a sword. Dalton sneers at him, calling him a high and mighty direct descendant who is actually a disgrace to the family. Klein turns to face him, calmly retorting that fooling around with girls behind the ballroom hardly constitutes family pride. Stunned that his secret is out, Dalton lunges at him, while Klein coolly asks if he's naive or just stupid to think money could stop rumors. With a simple, almost lazy movement, he sidesteps the clumsy attack. And effortlessly, he trips his aggressor, sending Dalton crashing face first onto the polished floor. As the boy sputters in rage, Klein calmly points out that he's just taking out the frustration of being crushed by Dylan on him. Enraged and humiliated, Dalton hurls a vicious insult, calling Klein a bastard who doesn't even know his own mother. The words strike a nerve, and Klein's demeanor shifts instantly to one of cold fury as he demands he repeat what he just said. Dalton is immediately struck with fear, realizing he has just crossed a line with the seemingly powerless boy. Klein reflects that the insult isn't about his unknown mother, but about the branch family's pathetic and blatant contempt for the direct line. His eyes, glowing with a familiar dark power, betray his inner turmoil as he questions how the hero's family could have fallen so low. In that moment, Archimod, the devil of the continent, wonders why the legacy of the hero who killed him has become so utterly pathetic. Before he can act, Dunkel intervenes, sternly telling Lord Dalton that he has gone far enough, and warns him that he will not tolerate any further disrespect toward his young master. Dalton clicks his tongue in annoyance but ultimately backs down from the knight's challenge. Retreating, he scoffs that Klein should be grateful his escort knight saved him, calling him a coward. As he stomps away, he throws one last childish taunt over his shoulder. Dunkel's hand rests on the hilt of his sword, a silent promise of what would have happened had the confrontation continued. Klein simply watches the scene unfold, an unreadable expression on his face. Turning his attention from the fleeing coward, he asks Dunkel if he happens to have a spare sword. Later that night, Dunkel accompanies Klein to a secluded clearing in the woods. There, the knight presents a sword to his young master, its steel gleaming in the moonlight. Confused, Dunkel asks why he needs a sword at such a late hour. Klein gives the blade a few experimental swings, trying to recall his brother's movements, prompting the knight to ask if he means the meteor sword. Dismissing his knight, he simply says he has something to check and tells him to head back first. Dunkel watches with a hint of pity, assuming Klein still has lingering attachments to swordsmanship despite having a body devoid of mana. However, he laments that a person without mana can never become a knight, let alone master a high-level family technique like the meteor sword. He is certain that even if his young master perfectly mimics the movements, actually pulling off the technique is impossible. Alone now, Klein closes his eyes, finding that the image of Dellen's swordsmanship is strangely clear in his mind. He visualizes every single detail of the meteor sword, the footwork, the timing of each push from the ground. His perfect memory allows him to recall the exact arc of the sword and, most impossibly, the very flow of mana itself. As he focuses, a crackle of immense purple energy begins to leak from his eyes. Sensing the disturbance, Dunkel turns back in shock, stunned by the palpable aura radiating from his supposedly manaless master. The knight's eyes widen in disbelief, wondering if what he's sensing could possibly be real. Then, in a massive explosion of purple energy, Klein perfectly executes the meteor sword, tearing apart a giant boulder. His eyes now glow with a brilliant, overwhelming purple light, brimming with unrestrained power. He stands amidst the swirling remnants of his attack, completely enveloped in the purple aura of the family's ultimate technique. Dunkel can only stare, dumbfounded, at the raw power that has just been unleashed before him. Stammering, he calls out to his young master, unable to comprehend what he has just witnessed. A wide, almost manic grin spreads across Klein's face as he looks at the results of his experiment. In a state of pure, shocked excitement, he realizes the impossible has happened. It actually works. A shocked Erin reacts to the unbelievable scene before her, a result of Klein's supposed purification ritual. Nearby, Priest Garrison sweats, also in disbelief at what he's witnessing. The cause of their shock is the sight of Klein's head being held underwater in a bucket of holy water. Garrison proudly announces that thanks to his training, the young master can now hold his breath for over a minute, prompting a stunned Erin to exclaim that he's like a fish. And as Klein finally gasps for air, the priest muses aloud about conducting the next ritual in a fish tank. Klein angrily complains about the extended duration, but Garrison casually explains that he felt an ominous aura coming from his room. Furious at the flimsy excuse, he accepts a towel from Erin as his other attendants look on. Just then, the knight Dunkel approaches with a sealed letter, announcing an invitation from Lord Dalton. Dunkel explains that Dalton, the cousin from the training grounds, supposedly wishes to apologize for his previous behavior. Klein recalls his cousin's aggressive actions and is immediately suspicious of the so-called apology. Taking the letter, he silently reads its contents. He learns it's an invitation to a hunting competition, which he finds strange given their hostile last encounter, and correctly deduces that the apology is merely a pretext to lure him away from the estate. Yet despite the obvious trap, when Dunkel asks if he'll go, he confidently states there's no reason to refuse. With a knowing smirk, he cryptically mentions that he has an ace up his sleeve. The sword he recently used to perfectly replicate his family's technique sits waiting in the corner. He reflects on his newfound mysterious ability to perfectly replicate any swordsmanship technique after seeing it just once. Though he doesn't understand the origin of this power, he knows it gives him a significant advantage. Dunkel quietly observes his young master, processing the bold decision. As the knight agrees to prepare a carriage, Priest Garrison overhears the mention of a hunting competition. The priest suddenly insists on accompanying them, leading to an immediate and annoyed protest from Klein. But he looks on with weary resignation as Garrison remains adamant. The priest explains his reasoning. For some reason, he feels a particularly ominous aura today. Later, the group's carriage makes its way through the forest towards the distant Cornwell estate. The ride is rough, with the carriage wheels jolting over the uneven terrain. Inside, Erin is overcome with motion sickness, resting uncomfortably on Garrison's lap. Our guide chides her for insisting on coming, though he offers her a pillow for comfort, and coolly explains that the rough terrain of the western forest is notoriously hard on first-time travelers. After that, he begins to offer more advice to the maid but trails off, noticing Garrison's gesture. Mistaking his young master's intent, the priest gets emotional, only for Klein to clarify that the pillow is for Erin, not him. Klein then gazes out the window, his mind drifting back to a time long past. As the former necromancer Archimod, he notes how much this land has changed over the centuries, and recalls when he was here, it was covered only with snow and corpses. The memory brings to mind his old nemesis, Burkle, the very man whose legacy he is now a part of. Dunkel, now clad in armor, interrupts his reverie to announce their arrival. The group has arrived at the grand and opulent Cornwell family estate. Klein takes in the sight of Dalton's home while Dunkel tends to a still nauseous Erin. He internally scoffs, noting that the Branch family's mansion is even more lavish than that of the main Rhineland house. He then cynically observes the guests, thinking what a waste of money it is to hold a hunting competition for children. His thoughts are cut short, however, when Dalton calls his name from across the courtyard. Dalton approaches with a sinister smirk, flanked by several vicious, emaciated hounds. With a mocking tone, he boasts about his well-built estate, funded by money he claims was squeezed from Klein's direct family line. He continues his taunts, sneering that someone locked away in a monastery would know nothing of how the world works. Klein ignores the insults, his attention fixed on the cruelly starved dogs, and impatiently asks to start the competition. His cousin smirks at this impatience, promising he has prepared something special. And with a dramatic gesture, Dalton announces the start of the cruel spectacle. The starving dogs are unleashed, charging forward in a frenzy. He then reveals the first part of his game. Meat has been scattered as bait throughout the nearby mountain. Driven mad by the scent, the starving dogs race towards the food. Dalton and his cronies take aim with their bows, intending to use the crazed animals for target practice. An arrow finds its mark, striking one of the helpless dogs. Dalton and his friends erupt in laughter, celebrating their successful hunt. Nearby, a concerned Aaron approaches one of the young participants who seems to be separated from the group. However, it's a ruse. Dalton corners her, condescendingly calling her the maid Klein drags around. He pats her on the head, sneering that he will give her a new purpose. Suddenly, Klein's hand clamps down on his wrist, his voice dangerously low as he tells him to let go. With eyes burning with cold fury, he warns his cousin to release her before he breaks his arm. Dalton scoffs, forcefully wrenching his arm free from Klein's grip. Telling him to stop acting tough, Dalton pushes him aside with his shoulder. He then leaps onto a horse and manically dares him to follow. As Klein mounts a horse to give chase, he orders Dunkel to stay behind with Aaron, ignoring the knight's pleas. To placate his concerned knight, he quickly hands him a mysterious scroll. Dunkel recognizes it as a one-time use signal magic scroll, capable of sending a signal without mana. Our guy explains his contingency plan, voicing his suspicion of Priest Garrison's sudden decision to join them, and instructs the knight to tear the scroll if the priest disappears, which will send a signal to a corresponding crest on his hand. Entrusting the plan to Dunkel, he gallops off, leaving his worried knight behind. From a distance, Priest Garrison silently watches the entire exchange unfold. Klein rides hard through the darkening forest, confident that his cousin couldn't have gone far. He soon arrives in a desolate clearing where Dalton is waiting, and mockingly asks what took so long, gesturing to the corpses of the hunted dogs. He crouches over one of the dead animals, his sword gleaming in the moonlight. Dismounting, Klein warily demands to know what he is planning. His eyes scan the unsettlingly quiet clearing, confirming his suspicions of a trap. Dalton ominously declares that this is the grand finale of today's competition. With a twisted expression, he reveals his true intent. The final prey of the day is Klein himself. He lays out his plan to kill Klein, cut off his head, and deliver it to his brother Dellen as a message. He then unleashes a torrent of insults, calling the Rhineland family a joke and an empty shell with no power. With a snap of his fingers, he springs his trap. Dozens of armed assassins emerge from the shadows, ready to claim the dukedom for the Branch family. Dalton gloats, imagining the gossip that will spread about the Rhineland family's downfall, and sneers at the thought of people mocking the main family, saying the young master died as dog food. But these insults trigger a memory for Klein, his killer, Burkle, speaking of protecting his descendants' future. Faced with this profound irony, he can't help but let out a small, amused snort. The snort then explodes into unrestrained, maniacal laughter that echoes through the silent forest. A bewildered and unnerved Dalton asks if he has finally lost his mind, but his laughter abruptly ceases, his expression hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. In a chilling transformation, the arrogant, powerful visage of the Necromancer Archimod surfaces, replacing that of the meek Klein. Dalton and his men recoil in shock at the sudden, terrifying shift in his aura. With eyes glowing in infernal red, he declares that the Rhineland family was built upon the ultimate sacrifice, his own life. He seethes with rage, questioning how these insignificant fools dare to insult the legacy he died to create. A torrent of sinister turquoise energy erupts from him, swirling around him like a tempest. Dalton stammers in fear, questioning how he can use magic without mana, but Klein corrects him, it's not magic. Now fully enveloped in the swirling power, he reveals the true nature of his ability, it's magi. The assassins panic at the sight, while Dalton freezes in terror as the horrifying implications of the word magi's dawn on him. Klein begins a dark incantation, smiling as he calls upon the ancient evil spirits buried beneath the very ground they stand on. Levitating in the eye of the storm, he commands the spirits to rise up and obey his will. The swirling magi intensifies, echoing his command to devour his enemies. Within the dark energy, the ghostly forms of skeletons begin to take shape. Dalton can only stare, his face a mask of tearful, abject terror, unable to believe what he's seeing. From the earth itself, an army of skeletal warriors rises, surrounding their new master as he commands them to consume every last resentful soul. With a wicked, triumphant grin, Klein, now fully channeling the Necromancer Archimod, points at his would-be assassins and gives his final chilling order, devour them all. Klein recalls the feeling of necromancy, a sensation he thought he'd forgotten over the 200 long years since his past life. And with it, visions of his past as Archimod, the devil of the continent, flood his mind. He sees himself walking a path paved with skulls, remembering the distant days of his reign. Now, reincarnated as Klein, he can still feel that familiar, nostalgic sensation of his necromantic power. The memories and after-images of his former self overlap endlessly in the darkness. Once again, he hears the voices of the dead calling out to him from a mountain of corpses, and he welcomes the familiar feeling, the resonance and the waves of dark energy. Finally, he fully embraces the nostalgic sensation of his true power returning. Across from him, Dalton stares in disbelief, just now realizing the horrifying truth of the situation. He cries out in terror, recognizing the legendary Necromancer Archimod standing before them. With a sinister smile, Klein confirms that he was indeed once called by that name. The other mercenaries, however, are baffled, questioning if the legendary Archimod wasn't just a rumor. Unaware of his true identity, they wonder what the strange skeletons standing behind him are. One of the skeletal warriors lets out an eerie screech. The captain remains silent, processing the impossible reality he's facing. His men, however, burst into laughter, mocking the appearance of the skeletal summons. One mercenary scoffs that after acting so tough, all the boy could summon was a pile of trash. The captain agrees, boasting that he's smashed hundreds of skeletons on missions, though he does note their black bones are unusual. However, they laugh, already planning to take a bone home as a souvenir after the battle. Dismissing the skeletons, the captain orders his men to take care of the ones blocking their way. And so, the mercenaries draw their bows, preparing to eliminate the undead soldiers. Just then, they calmly load their weapons. One of the beastmen mercenaries takes aim with a heavy crossbow. At the captain's command, the mercenaries fire. A massive volley of arrows flies through the air, aimed directly at the young necromancer and his undead. The arrows converge on him, seemingly guaranteeing his demise. The projectiles land with a thunderous impact, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. The captain smirks, assuming the boy must be a bloody pulp by now. But his confidence shatters as he sees the arrows were all blocked mid-air. As the smoke clears, it reveals Klein, completely unharmed and surrounded by skeletons who have manifested magical shields. He muses that 200 years is a long time, as it seems no one recognizes his skeletons anymore. The mercenaries are stunned, exclaiming that the skeletons didn't have shields a second ago. While the frustrated captain yells in confusion, Klein calmly states that such a reaction is normal for those expecting ordinary skeletons. With a chilling smirk, Klein declares, "My skeletons are different." The captain's eyes widen in shock and dawning horror. Klein orders his skeletons to release their defensive formation, and he vows that those who mocked and insulted the North will be crushed by his hands, and commands all forces to prepare for attack. With a clenched fist, he prepares to unleash his army's full might. The simple, devastating command is given, "Charge." The undead army surges forward with a terrifying speed, unlike any skeletons the mercenaries have ever seen. The captain can only watch in utter shock at the impossible sight. His mind reels, questioning how mere skeletons are able to run. He then screams for his men to maintain formation, but it's too late as the undead legion crashes into their ranks. The mercenaries are immediately overwhelmed, their defenses crumbling in an instant. The battlefield erupts into a one-sided slaughter as the skeletons tear through their foes. Watching his men get decimated, the captain can only curse in frustration. While he fruitlessly tries to rally his troops, Klein calmly issues new orders for his second crossbow unit to surround the enemy. The mercenaries look up in panic as skeletal archers suddenly appear in the trees above. The undead crossbow unit takes aim, preparing to fire down on the surrounded men. Realizing they're caught in a pincer attack, the mercenaries yell for everyone to run for their lives. Klein gives the single cold command to fire. A volley of skeletal bolts rains down from the trees. The mercenaries are struck down from above, their attempt to flee turning into a panicked rout. Cries of pain and death echo through the forest as the volley finds its marks. On the ground, the melee continues as one skeleton effortlessly impales another mercenary. The captain, sweating profusely, realizes these are nothing like the skeletons he knows. Fearing they'll all be wiped out, he desperately orders his men to drop their crossbows and engage in close combat. But his terrified men ignore his commands, forcing him to engage the undead alone. At this, he grits his teeth and prepares to strike down one of the skeletal soldiers himself. Cursing the undead bastards, he swings his sword with all his might and successfully decapitates the skeleton, its skull clattering to the ground. He laughs maniacally, shouting that aiming for their heads is the key. His victory is cut short, however, as the now headless skeleton brutally attacks him. Stunned, the captain struggles to understand how it's still moving after he cut its head off. Just then, Klein's voice echoes through the clearing, reminding the captain of what he said earlier, and calmly repeats that his skeletons are different. To the captain's horror, the headless skeleton calmly walks over to its severed head. It picks up its own skull, its eyes still glowing with malevolent energy. As the skeleton reattaches its head, Klein explains that this regenerative ability was the biggest reason he could once sweep across the continent. The captain stares in utter disbelief, realizing the undead can simply reattach their own heads. Klein elaborates that these spiritual bodies, summoned with magi, don't die easily and follow orders with tactical precision. A surviving mercenary, trembling, can only wonder what in the hell these things are, and cry out in despair, asking why the skeletons just keep coming back. Klein remarks that with his current body, 11 is his maximum, but it's more than enough to handle them. With a chilling smile, he asks the terrified survivors, "Shall we continue?" The screams of the dying mercenaries echo from the forest. Meanwhile, back at the estate, the only sounds are those of a peaceful fountain and carefree laughter. Completely oblivious to the slaughter, Erin cheerfully recounts a story about a young Klein to a fascinated Garrison. She bursts into laughter, finding the memory of the young master hilarious. Garrison smiles warmly, observing how much she seems to like the young master. With her cheeks puffed out, she declares that of course, she likes him. As she begins to gush about how wonderful Klein is, the scene cuts back to a mercenary begging for his life. The terrified man pants for breath, realizing his end is near. Erin's voiceover says Klein is kind and sweet, juxtaposed with the brutal image of a skeleton impaling a screaming man. She then fondly recalls how he even shared his cookies with her. Blissfully unaware, she concludes that Klein is the warmest person in the world. Back in the blood-soaked forest, Klein watches the ongoing massacre with a cold, detached gaze. His relentless undead continue to cut down the mercenaries without mercy. The captain struggles to save his life as he swings his sword. He manages to decapitate a skeleton, cursing their relentless assault. But he looks up in shock when the undead warrior regenerates from a wound he just inflicted. Gritting his teeth, he realizes that to win, he needs to stop them from regenerating. Suddenly, he remembers the summoner, realizing his true target must be Klein himself. He decides that if he can just take out the summoner, the skeletons will disappear. Ignoring the undead around him, he makes a desperate final charge directly toward Klein. Dalton screams at Klein, telling him to stop playing dead and face him. As he brings his sword down, he roars for him to die. But Klein's eye flashes with a purple, star-like glint. As crackling energy gathers, he thinks to himself, "I can see it." He recalls his unique ability. With the power of his eye, he can analyze and replicate any technique. He then visualizes his half-brother, Delin, perfectly executing their family's secret sword art. Dalton's eyes widen in absolute shock as he recognizes the stance. Klein then perfectly unleashes the secret art of the Rhineland family, the meteor sword. With a blinding flash of purple light, his attack overpowers Dalton's. Dalton looks down in confusion and shock, a fatal wound now blooming on his chest. Klein's voice cuts through the silence, promising Dalton that he will not have a peaceful death. With his eyes glowing intensely, he towers over his fallen cousin and declares, "The judgment begins now." Standing over the defeated Dalton, Klein admits that his cousin, Dalton, was right about one thing. He reflects on his past life, acknowledging that as Archimod, he was defeated because he couldn't overcome the one weakness of a necromancer, the vulnerability of the caster. But now, as Klein Rhineland, he wields not only the magi of his former self, but also the swordsmanship of the Rhineland family, a power he will now use to protect them. And he realizes with supreme irony that the blood of his sworn enemy has made him stronger than ever before. The wounded captain can only look on in confusion as our protagonist declares that he can no longer turn away from his new family. Helpless on the ground, the man struggles to comprehend what he's talking about. With that, Klein delivers the final blow, vowing to rebuild the ruined Rhineland family for its founder, Burkle. Meanwhile, Dalton's consciousness awakens in a black void, unable to see or understand where he is. He feels a strange sensation, quickly realizing his hands are bound. And to his horror, he discovers his ankles are also shackled to a menacing chair. Suddenly, a familiar silhouette appears in the darkness, calmly telling him that he's awake. The figure reveals himself to be Archimod, explaining that this place is a custom-made afterlife of his own creation. Dalton can only stare in disbelief, processing the reality that he's in Archimod's afterlife. The Necromancer begins to list Dalton's sins, reminding him of the dogs he starved and tortured. And he recounts how his cousin took sadistic joy in abusing the animals under the guise of hunting. Dalton erupts in anger, screaming that it's all bullshit and demanding to be released immediately. But then, a terrifying realization begins to dawn. He remembers being cut down by Klein's sword, a fatal blow that should have ended his life. Archimod confirms his fears, explaining that he is already dead, and this afterlife is merely a place to return the karma he accrued. Dalton desperately denies the truth, unable to accept his fate. He then screams for him to stop the nonsense and let him go, still clinging to a sliver of hope. But Archimod, his power flaring, coldly states that his captive's belief doesn't matter. Announcing that the time has come to pay for his sins, he summons the vengeful spirits of every dog Dalton ever harmed. Dalton's face twists in pure terror as he sees the glowing-eyed beasts emerge from the darkness. Archimod commands him to listen closely to the snarls and growls of his victims. The spectral hounds then leap forward, a terrifying pack ready to enact its revenge. Paralyzed with fear, Dalton can only watch as his karma closes in. Archimod's final words echo in the void, "Remember, this place is the hell you created." And so, Dalton's afterlife of eternal torment begins with a blood-curdling scream. Back in the real world, the now soulless body of him lies still on the ground. Having concluded his judgment, Klein surveys the battlefield, his expression grim. His skeletal soldiers approach him, their task complete. As a reward for their help, he prepares to repay his undead servants. He breaks the curse of necromancy binding them, finally granting them their freedom. The skeletons dissolve into motes of light, at last finding peace. With his army gone, Klein is left alone in the silent, misty forest. He then begins to ponder the meaning of true death and the unknown purpose behind his own reincarnation. His thoughts are interrupted by a new voice from a hooded figure who expresses surprise that young Master Klein is wielding necromancy. Wary, Klein demands to know who the stranger is and if he witnessed the entire fight. The hooded necromancer cryptically replies, "You don't need to know," as green energy swirls around his hand. Before Klein can react, the stranger unleashes his power across the battlefield, raising the corpses of the fallen mercenaries. The eyes of the dead glow with an eerie turquoise light as they are reanimated. The hooded man stands triumphantly amidst his newly created army of the undead. Klein instantly recognizes the technique as a revival art that controls corpses, and correctly identifies the stranger as another necromancer, who remarks that the bodies will be useful even though Dalton failed. Elsewhere, an unsettling laugh echoes across the mountains. Back at the estate, a cheerful Aaron tries to convince Dunkel to listen to some funny stories about Klein's childhood. Dunkel, however, is too preoccupied with worry to listen, clutching a tattered scroll. He wonders why the young master would be carrying a signal magic scroll, an item meant only for extreme emergencies. With 3 hours having passed and still no news, Dunkel's bad feeling intensifies. Deciding he can't wait any longer, he rushes off to find Klein, only to be intercepted by knights. The Conwell Knights block his path, telling him it would be problematic if he were to leave his post during the competition. Dunkel's expression hardens as he assesses the situation. He recognizes the Conwell family crest on their armor, and correctly deduces that they are Dalton's escorts. Realizing they have an ulterior motive, he asserts his authority as commander of the Rhineland's Knight Order and warns them not to interfere. He stares them down, making it clear that he will not stand idly by if they try to stop him. The Conwell Knights, clearly intimidated by his authority and intensity, can only swallow nervously. As a worried Aaron approaches, Dunkel instructs her that he is going to look for the young master, and tells her to return to the mansion with Priest Garrison for her own safety. But Aaron surprises him, revealing that Garrison already left, looking very serious. She explains that the priest declared his ominous feeling was right, which triggers Dunkel's memory of Klein's suspicious warning about Garrison. A wave of panic hits him as he realizes the gravity of the situation and leaps onto his horse. Remembering Klein's instruction to activate the scroll if the priest disappeared, he rips the signal scroll with his teeth. Now certain that something terrible has happened, he gallops frantically towards the forest. Meanwhile, Klein finds himself facing off against the enemy Necromancer and his newly raised army. He knows he's at a severe disadvantage. His magi was completely depleted in the previous battle, leaving him unable to use necromancy. As his stomach rumbles from mana exhaustion, he knows he's in a tight spot. Just then, the hooded Necromancer gives a simple command to his forces, "Move." The horde of undead charges forward with a single goal, to eliminate young Master Klein. Unfazed, Klein scoffs at the idea that they are equals just because they both use revival arts. And he sees the glowing sigil on his hand, the signal scroll. The approaching zombies are completely unaware of the imminent danger. With a smirk, Klein unleashes his trump card, telling the Necromancer he's finished. The hooded figure can only stare in utter confusion as the sky begins to change. A brilliant column of golden light descends from the heavens, aimed directly at the battlefield. Priest Garrison smashes into the ground with the force of a meteor, unleashing a massive shockwave of holy power. Glowing with divine energy, he begins his incantation, and commands the light to grant rest to the dead. A wave of holy light completely annihilates the charging undead army, purifying them on the spot. The priest's silhouette stands in the blinding light as he tells Klein to be at ease. The shocked Necromancer demands to know who this powerful newcomer is. Garrison's expression is grim and determined. He introduces himself not by name, but by his title, a proxy of the Holy Order. The fanatical priest, Garrison Veerman, declares he is moving out, ready for battle. The Pope's three most elite enforcers, known as the Proxies, are the strongest military force of the Holy Order. Only they can wield the sacred artifacts left by St. Gall, for they are the strongest military force of the Holy Order. Each is said to possess power rivaling an entire fortress, a fact demonstrated as a wave of holy light obliterates the undead army. The hooded Necromancer cries out in pain as the overwhelming holy power washes over him. The divine energy tears violently through the ranks of the undead, purifying them. Shaken to his core, the Necromancer demands to know the identity of his powerful foe. Klein recognizes the newcomer as Garrison, the proxy renowned for his pure martial prowess. Just then, the priest reassures the onlooking Klein, telling him not to worry. He announces his arrival and smugly confirms the Necromancer's fears. When the undead charge at him, he remains unfazed. The reanimated corpses can only let out guttural screams before being completely obliterated. Garrison's holy infused fists shatter the undead, turning them to dust on impact. As he continues his rampage, he declares to the sinners that their judgment has arrived. With a terrifying zeal in his eyes, he instructs his enemies to beg and plead. He then promises to grant them a baptism of fire for their transgressions. As the remaining undead charge, he proclaims that he will wash away their sins. He stomps the ground with explosive force, declaring his actions as both mercy and righteous judgment as he continues to systematically explode the skeletons' heads. Garrison concludes his one-man holy war, calling the brutal purification judgment. The hooded Necromancer watches in disbelief, questioning why a proxy of the Holy Order is present and where this insane power is coming from. And he's left stunned as Garrison stands alone in a field of vanquished undead. Cursing that this wasn't part of the deal, the Necromancer decides to make a run for it. As he runs away, he screams, "That's completely absurd." However, Garrison instantly appears behind him, calmly asking, "Where do you think you're going?" Caught in an invisible grip, the Necromancer screams in agony as his face contorts in pain. Garrison coldly tells him to be thankful, noting that he hasn't even finished his prayer yet. As the Necromancer's eye begins to melt, the priest declares that judgment has been passed upon him. Invoking the name of the light, he crushes the man's head with the force of his grip. All that remains is a single eyeball, which rolls across the ground before being stopped by a boot. Garrison suddenly addresses the exhausted Klein, startling him. Our protagonist recalls the sheer power he just witnessed, where the priest's mere presence and forward steps generated enough wind pressure to tear apart over 20 bodies. After that, the priest explains that he felt the energy of necromancy and rushed over immediately. Yet, Klein remains silent and on guard, knowing he is in a precarious situation. Garrison smirks, noting that something about the situation feels strange. Placing a heavy, blood-stained hand on Klein's shoulder, he probes further. He voices his suspicion, stating the powerful necromantic energy he sensed doesn't seem to belong to the man he just executed. Klein internally curses the priest, realizing he's under intense suspicion. The tension rises as our protagonist understands that one wrong move will result in his immediate death. Just in the nick of time, a knight arrives on horseback, calling out for young Master Klein. It's Dunkel, who gallops up frantically asking if he's alright. Klein is surprised to see him, as his arrival provides a crucial interruption. Overcome by exhaustion, Klein winces, admitting to himself that using necromancy took too great a toll on his body. Dunkel cries out in alarm at his weakened state. He dismounts and rushes toward the young master, who has collapsed on the ground. As Dunkel helps support him, Klein tries to play it cool, saying his legs just gave out. The knight then asks the critical question, "Where is Lord Dalton?" With a calm expression, Klein delivers the blunt and shocking truth, "I killed him," and explains it was self-defense because Dalton tried to kill him first, which brings the scene to a formal family meeting. At the meeting, an enraged man slams his hand on the table, demanding an explanation. This is Count Delkin Conwell, Dalton's father, who is outraged at the accusation that his son was an assassin. He passionately defends his son's honor, accusing Klein of framing a dead man. Klein's father, Heinkel, interjects, suggesting they focus on facts rather than emotion. He holds up Klein's testimony, stating that his son's story remained consistent despite hours of intense interrogation. He then presents damning evidence, a record of 20 mercenaries dispatched from the Commonwealth domain, suggesting Dalton was indeed plotting something. Delkin begins to sweat, silently cursing his son's men for their sloppiness. Changing tactics, he argues that it's impossible for a swordless Klein to have defeated Dalton, a skilled knight. Other family members murmur in agreement, recalling Heinkel himself said the boy had no magic power. Realizing he can't defend his son's actions, the Count knows he'll be ruined if the assassination attempt is proven. So, he decides to pivot and launch a personal attack on Klein's character. He then brings up Klein's rumored lineage and his childhood habit of claiming to be the Necromancer Archimad. Heinkel angrily warns him to watch his words and not slander his son. But the Count loudly accuses Klein of hiring a third party to murder Dalton and then framing his son for the crime. A calm voice says, "Enough," and Cromwell turns in surprise, wondering who dared to interrupt him. Klein makes his entrance, telling the council he's heard enough of their baseless accusations, and succinctly summarizes the events. He killed Dalton in self-defense and was then assisted by Garrison against another assailant who summoned the undead. When Delkin dismisses his account as a lie, Klein turns the accusation back on him. With a sinister smirk and glowing red eyes, he asks if they would rather believe the truth, that he is Archimad. Delkin flinches at the implied threat, as Klein internally reaffirms the vow he made upon killing Dalton. He is determined to rebuild the Rhineland family, ironically founded on his past self's death, and will not let vermin tarnish it, so he decides to start by dealing with the Branch family, but a knock at the door interrupts his train of thought. A new arrival apologizes for being late. Commander Laya of the Blue Holy Spear Knights makes a dramatic entrance, stunning the assembly. Klein recognizes her from the demonstration earlier and is puzzled by her sudden appearance at the family meeting. When a council member objects to her presence, Heinkel overrules them, stating he permitted her to be there, and explains that since Dalton was undertaking a mission from her knight order, Commander Laya has every right to attend the proceedings. After making eye contact with Klein, she surprises everyone by requesting a private word with him. A completely baffled Klein can only wonder why he has been singled out. His father, though curious, permits the private discussion as long as it's brief. Heinkel tells his son to go ahead, but to be quick about it. Internally, Klein expresses frustration with the perplexing behavior of knights. However, he quickly realizes this is a valuable opportunity to discern her motives. He logically deduces her request stems from a need for verification, suspicion, or a desire to test him. Formally accepting his father's permission, Klein walks toward Laya. He follows her out of the main hall, resolved to face whatever comes and not run away from his new goals. Confident in his abilities, Klein plans to turn this unexpected meeting to his advantage. In a private antechamber, Laya pauses, creating a moment of tense silence. She finally breaks it with a single word, say. But before Klein can react, she closes the distance, corners him, and asks a stunningly forward question, "Can I touch you?" Completely caught off guard by her bizarre request, a flustered Klein can only stammer, "Do what now?" An introduction of Laya Ren Paul Wyvern reveals she is a key figure from another of the continent's great families. She is not only the eldest daughter of a duke, but also a master of spearmanship and the revered knight commander of the Blue Sacred Spear Knights. A look at her official record reveals her prowess, beginning with a campaign against a massive horde of orc-like monsters. During one such monster suppression operation, she found herself facing the enemy threat all alone. Yet, with incredible skill, she cut down her foes one by one. And while searching for civilians in the Western Forest, she was ambushed by numerous high-ranking monsters, and the official report states that Knight Commander Laya successfully exterminated all the monsters single-handedly. Her reputation as a peerless warrior was cemented by this solitary victory against overwhelming odds. Back in the present, Laya impatiently tells a bewildered Klein to hurry up and follow her. But as he starts to comply, she coldly rebuffs him, stating they aren't real family, and he shouldn't act so friendly. But he recalls his father's explanation of their distant family connection, which makes Laya his technical cousin. However, Klein knows that since she is the daughter of the first wife, they share no blood and are essentially strangers. Suddenly, she stops him, announcing that what she's about to ask is purely out of personal curiosity. Then, without warning, she aggressively corners him against a wall, leaving him completely shocked. Leaning in uncomfortably close, she asks the astonished young man, "Can I touch you?" Flustered, he demands to know what she means by suddenly wanting to touch him. Ignoring his protests, she firmly grabs his hand to inspect it. She meticulously examines his palm, noting that it's soft and smooth like a baby's hand, without a single blister or scar. Our guy panics internally, realizing she's checking for the calluses of a trained swordsman. Pressing on specific tendons, she explains that even if a swordsman's hands are smooth, their tendons can't lie. Her eyes lock with his as she delivers her verdict. "You haven't used a sword, have you?" She then questions how he could possibly have defeated Dalton and 20 mercenaries without any signs of sword training. Laya posits her final theory, wondering aloud if he survived by using some other mysterious power. Feeling cornered by her dangerously accurate deductions, Klein forcefully shoves her away. He recognizes that she's far too sharp, thinking that she might as well be asking if he's Archimod, and realizes her intense gaze is a test, designed to gauge his reaction rather than simply get an answer. So he reasons that silence or hesitation will be seen as a confirmation of her suspicions. Deciding that a strong offense is the best defense, he smirks and asks, "Yeah, what if I am?" He doubles down on the bluff, boldly asking her, "What if I'm Archimod?" To his surprise, Laya bursts out laughing, finding the idea utterly ridiculous and scoffing. "A brat like you is Archimod." The legendary Necromancer is utterly flabbergasted, repeating the word brat in stunned disbelief. For the first time in 2 lives, Archimod is left speechless and existentially wounded by a simple insult. He stammers, hoping she meant something else, but she coolly offers to repeat herself. She then proceeds to deliver a devastating critique, calling him too small, badly proportioned, and lacking any presence. In short, a brat. The repeated insult of a little brat deals a mortal blow to his ego. Suffering from severe internal damage, Klein can only listen as she concludes he is neither Archimod nor a swordsman. She then adds a baffling parting shot, saying that if he had proven to be either, she would have given him her lips. He is left utterly confused by her strange proposal. Still reeling from being called a brat, he struggles to comprehend her motives, wondering if it's bribery or some kind of political tactic. As she turns to leave, she tells him they'll be late for the meeting. Pausing on the balcony, she turns back to him with one last thought. She enigmatically tells him, Archimod would never, before trailing off, leaving Klein to ponder her words. A butler announces the entrance of young Master Klein and Lady Laya into the main hall. Inside, Klein acknowledges his disadvantage, knowing that as the family's nuisance, no one will believe his claim of self-defense. He sees Count Delkin glaring at him, ready to capitalize on his poor reputation. His father, Heinkel, cuts to the chase, asking what he and Laya were discussing outside. In response, he dramatically unsheathes a sword, startling Laya. With a powerful slam, he plants the sword into the ground before the entire assembly. The bold and unexpected move shocks everyone in the room, including his own father. Pointing the blade directly at Delkin, Klein declares he will prove his innocence himself, and he proposes they settle the matter the old northern way, like men. To the shock of the entire room, he formally challenges Count Conwell to a trial by combat. A stunned Count Conwell can only shout in disbelief at the audacious challenge. Trial by combat is an ancient judicial method where a duel's outcome determines the final verdict when evidence is unclear. In essence, it's a system where the winner is declared right and gets whatever they want. Delkin questions the sudden proposal, but Klein cuts him off, stating he has plenty of reasons. He lists his grievances, reminding the Count that he tried to frame him for a crime and insulted both him and his late mother. Internally, however, he admits that only half of that is true. While he has no feelings for his new mother, the rumors about him being Archimod are, in fact, correct. Ignoring the Count's sputtering, he impatiently tells him to hurry up and decide. The assembled nobles begin to murmur with excitement at the prospect of witnessing the ancient tradition. Duke Heinkel Rhineland intervenes, upholding the tradition and guaranteeing that the outcome of the duel will be absolute. As his father declares all previous evidence void, Count Conwell realizes this could be an opportunity for him. A sinister smile spreads across Delkin's face as he hatches a plan to send a champion in his place to kill Klein. But Klein sees right through the scheme and smirks, confident he can handle anyone Delkin sends and internally warning the Count to go to hell. With the terms set, Delkin accepts the challenge, scheduling the duel for 4 days from now, all while Klein thinks that this is just the beginning of his true plan, and he vows to use this duel against the Conwells as a stepping stone to assert his power over the branch families. This is the first step in his grand ambition to completely overhaul the entire Rhineland family structure. Later, in a private chamber, his brother Dellen furiously objects to the decision. He confronts Klein, asking if he's out of his mind for proposing a trial by combat where he could be killed. Klein coolly dismisses his brother's concerns, stating that he's well aware of the risks. Dellen is horrified to learn that their father has already sanctioned the deadly duel. In a desperate attempt to protect him, Dellen offers to fight as Klein's champion, but his younger brother bluntly rejects the offer, Argai argues that the family's power lies with their father and his brother, the successor. He tells him to wake up, questioning the logic of putting the precious family heir in harm's way, and explains that if Dellen fought, it would simply give their enemies a legitimate chance to kill the heir of Rhineland, a point his brother cannot refute. While acknowledging Dellen's frustration, he insists that this trial is absolutely necessary for him to change his reputation. Standing firm, he tells his brother that he has no reason to yield, triggering a flashback for Dellen. He tearfully recounts the day Klein was born, remembering how happy he was to finally have a little brother, and recalls the very moment he first saw the newborn infant. To the young Dellen, his baby brother looked just like an angel. Returning to the present, Dellen pours out his heart, saying he waited 7 agonizing years for him to return from the Holy Order, only for him to immediately risk his life. Overwhelmed with emotion, he grabs Klein by the shoulders. With tears in his eyes, he begs him to listen, leaving the reincarnated Necromancer confused by this genuine display of brotherly love. Just as Dellen is about to make his plea, Captain Dunkel enters the room with an urgent message. He apologizes for the interruption and announces that Count Conwell has already chosen his champion for the duel. He then reveals the champion's name is Randall, an infamous excommunicated knight from the Empire known for his prowess in battle. The scene shifts to a dark and bloody tavern as he begins to explain the reason for the knight's notoriety. Mounted on the wall is a roaring lion crest, a symbol of the knight's ferocity. Dunkel reveals Randall was excommunicated for his uncontrollable bloodlust, a fact made horrifyingly clear by the carnage-filled room. The massive knight, Randall, is shown chugging a drink amidst the bodies of his victims. Contemplating his new opponent, the brute sinisterly remarks that it's been a while since he's heard the screams of a little boy. Before his trial by combat, Klein receives the specially crafted sword he requested. Dunkel confirms he crafted it exactly as requested, but warns him to be careful, because it is designed to shatter the moment it clashes with a mana-infused blade. Despite its fragility, our guy is satisfied, believing the weapon is perfect for his plan. With his weapon in hand, he declares it's time to head out to the arena. Our guy strides confidently into the dueling grounds, ready to face his champion. The audience murmurs in surprise and excitement as Lord Klein actually appears for the trial. From the stands, Count Delkin laughs, shocked that the boy dared to show up in person. He taunts Duke Heinkel, warning that his champion from the Empire will be too much for a manaless boy. While suggesting that Dellen should fight instead, he looks for the champion, as Heinkel remains stoically silent. Meanwhile, Klein scans the empty arena, searching for his opponent. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms over him as a voice from above asks if the champion has come out yet. The colossal figure of Randall leaps from the stands, crashing into the arena floor. And he menacingly asks, "Are you Lord Klein?" The hulking brute is officially identified as Conwell's champion, Randall. Taking in Klein's slight frame, Randall comments that he's much younger than he'd heard. He then taunts him, wondering aloud what gruesome sound his thin neck will make when it snaps. But before Randall can even complete his threatening gesture, Klein darts backward with surprising speed. The crowd is bewildered by this sudden movement, mistaking his preemptive dodge for cowardice. Count Delkin seizes the opportunity to mock Duke Heinkel, questioning if the boy can even handle the duel. Randall smirks condescendingly, believing he has already terrified his young opponent. Klein, however, is merely startled, admitting to himself that the sudden lunge caught him off guard. He realizes the champion's grab reminded him of the trauma inflicted by Priest Garrison, causing an instinctive, fearful reaction. As Laya watches from the stands, he silently curses Garrison for being useless even when he's not around. She observes the unfolding duel with a pensive and intrigued expression. Her subordinate urges her to leave before she gets in trouble, but she simply dismisses his concerns. Instead, Laya quietly makes a wager with herself, promising to give the boy a kiss if he can defeat the monstrous knight. And there is also something she needs to confirm. Embarrassed by his earlier flinch, our guy tries to play it off, claiming he just has a stiff neck. Yet as he's mid-sentence warning Randall not to touch his shoulder, the brute grabs him anyway. Furious, he calls him a perverted bastard, asking if his ears are stuffed with muscles. The insult strikes a nerve, as he suggests the brute's inability to follow orders is why the Empire abandoned him. Randall's expression turns sinister as he welcomes the boy's foul mouth. He roars that his opponent will have more to scream about later, unleashing a powerful punch. But in a split second, Klein unbuttons his coat, preparing for serious combat. The champion's fist smashes into the ground, narrowly missing his target and shattering the stone. The impact creates a massive crater in the arena floor, sending a shockwave outward. Confused, Randall looks up from the point of impact, unable to find him. He opens his hand, only to find the tattered remains of Klein's jacket. Spectators shout in alarm at the destructive power, wondering where Klein disappeared to. Even Randall is left standing amidst the dust, searching for his vanished opponent. Having used his jacket as a decoy, Klein lands gracefully a safe distance away. Now unencumbered, he stands ready to fight in his vest and shirt. He acknowledges the champion's nasty temper, realizing a direct clash will be incredibly difficult. Assessing the situation, he admits he can't take it easy, as a single hit from that massive body would be fatal. The crowd whispers nervously, conceding that while his dodges are impressive, a single graze could shatter his bones. From the stands, Dylan watches with grim certainty, believing his younger brother is walking to his death. He recalls his brother's reasoning for fighting himself, to prevent their enemies from gaining a legal excuse to kill a Rhineland heir. The memory of this conversation fuels his intense worry. Back in the arena, Randall closes the distance with another powerful swing of his massive sword, but our guy easily dodges the attack. With his eyes glowing, Klein calmly uses his own fragile sword to counterattack. As the sword is about to hit, the champion reacts instantly, grabs it, and hurls our guy with brutal force. Klein lands and slides back, digging his sword into the ground to halt his momentum from the powerful exchange. From the stands, Dylan shouts his brother's name in alarm as Randall relentlessly presses his attack. But Klein continues to evade the monstrous knight's furious blows. Frustrated, the brute taunts his opponent, yelling that he can't win just by dodging. He then tries to bait him, daring him to use the necromancy he's rumored to possess. He then screams, "Aren't you the great Archimald?" hoping to force his hand. The taunt has an unexpected effect, as Randall sees a terrifying shift in the boy's demeanor and recoils in shock. For a brief, terrifying moment, Klein lets Archimald's murderous intent surface, contemplating slaughtering everyone present. The sheer killing intent is so palpable that the battle-hardened champion flinches in pure instinctual fear. He instinctively leaps backward, creating distance from the source of the overwhelming aura. Delkin and the crowd are utterly baffled, questioning why the brutish champion would suddenly dodge. Randall, now sweating profusely, tries to process what he just felt, knowing there was nothing physically there to dodge. Suddenly, he recognizes the sensation. It's the same ominous aura that belonged to the Necromancer Archimald. In his mind's eye, he saw the ghost of the legendary Necromancer overlaid on the boy's small frame. A bewildered Delkin asks his brother what's going on with the champion. But Duke Heinkel simply watches, his gaze fixed on his younger son with an unreadable expression. Klein pulls back his terrifying aura, calmly assuring his opponent that he won't use necromancy. Holding his sword with newfound purpose, he proudly declares, "Because I am a Rhineland." He asserts that a trial by combat is a place to prove oneself with a sword and a sword alone. This bold declaration stuns both his father and his brother into silence. Inspired by his words, the crowd erupts into a massive cheer for Lord Klein. Even Count Delkin gets swept up in the moment when the crowd cheers for a proper duel. And people scream that the boy's confidence wasn't just a bluff. Dismissing the strange aura as a coincidence, Randall begins to gather his mana, confident in his superior physical strength. After all, he reminds himself, the boy has no mana, while he is overflowing with it, so he begins to channel his power, recalling that the strength of imperial swordsmanship lies in an unrestrained use of mana. The technique requires him to push every one of his senses to its absolute limit. He exerts total control over his breath, muscles, and blood flow, preparing for an ultimate attack. Infused with red mana, he leaps high into the air, aiming to overwhelm his opponent with a single blow. The Imperial style is designed to hunt down an opponent with one overwhelming burst of explosive power. Screaming "Die, Rhineland," he brings his sword down in a devastating arc. Yet Klein sidesteps the massive attack, which carves a glowing red trench in the arena floor. His eyes glow with purple light as he perfectly analyzes every aspect of the assault. With his enhanced perception, he reads his opponent's technique and mana capacity. He foresees every possible arc of the blade, leaving the brutish knight with no way to land a hit. Furious at being dodged so easily, Randall yells that the boy is like a damn fly. He roars, "DI," and unleashes another desperate mana-fueled strike. And once again, Klein effortlessly evades the attack, moving like a blur. The attack slams into the ground, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris. Randall stands within the dust cloud, having completely lost sight of his opponent. He wonders in disbelief if the boy actually managed to read every single trajectory of his sword in an instant. Exploiting the opening, Klein leaps from the dust cloud, appearing above and behind his massive foe. As he descends, he coolly points out that a body that large leaves its back completely exposed. Then, in a flash of purple energy, he executes the Rhineland family's secret technique, Meteor Sword, impaling Randall from behind. Dylan and his father watch in absolute shock, instantly recognizing their family's signature sword art. Randall lets out a scream of pure agony and disbelief, unable to comprehend what is happening. Impaled and defeated, his last thought is how a boy with no mana could possibly perform such a technique. Watching from the stands, Lia's subordinate turns to his commander in utter disbelief, asking if she saw what he just saw. Lia can only stare, her face flushed and her eyes wide with shock and newfound admiration. A flashback shows Duke Heinkel confessing to Dunkel that he wanted to intervene in the duel himself, and confides that acting on his personal feelings would only further damage the Rhineland family's prestige. Confused, Dunkel questions why the Duke permitted the duel, believing Klein has no chance of winning against a knight from the Empire. At this, the Duke expresses deep regret, explaining that he felt he had no right to stop Klein from defending his late mother's honor after failing to protect him in the past. Overcome with guilt, he questions what right he has to stop his son now. Clenching his fist, he laments his powerlessness, feeling that in the end, he can't protect anything he holds dear. At this, Dunkel consoles him, saying that he doesn't have to worry about the young master. Recalling Klein's previous victory, he confidently states that the young master doesn't fight battles he knows he'll lose. Back in the present, Heinkel is taken aback by the scene. The northern swordsmanship of the Rhineland family is rooted in the harsh, frozen fields they call home. Unlike imperial swordsmanship, which is like a lion's overwhelming predation, their style is born from the need to conserve mana. The imperial style, for instance, relies on unleashing a massive burst of mana to overpower an opponent all at once. In contrast, Rhineland swordsmanship is more like a rabbit, patient and seemingly passive. But like a predator in disguise, its true nature is hidden until the perfect moment to strike. Its core principle is temperance, like an eagle waiting for the perfect opportunity. The essence of the style is to strike at an opponent's opening with minimal mana consumption, ensuring maximum efficiency. This philosophy of temperance and efficiency is the very heart of their swordsmanship style. Back in the arena, Klein explains that the ultimate swordsmanship draws maximum efficiency from minimum mana. He then smirks, revealing, this is precisely how someone supposedly without mana can wield the family's techniques, and taunts his opponent, claiming that while his technique might lack raw power, it's more than enough to defeat him. Enraged by the little rat's taunts, the knight's face contorts into a furious snarl. He lets out a deafening roar, unleashing a tidal wave of red mana that fills the arena. The crowd gasps, and watching from the stands, Count Delkin recognizes it as Randall's secret technique. The knight summons the image of a roaring beast, using a mana burst designed to instantly seal his opponent's movements. Believing victory is his, he screams at Klein not to make him laugh, declaring himself the winner. And with his mana-infused fist, he lunges forward to deliver the finishing blow. Watching in horror from the stands, his brother Dellin screams a warning to watch out. But to everyone's astonishment, Klein effortlessly blocks the powerful attack with his sword. A spark erupts in the arena as both swords clash. A flashback reveals that Klein had a special sword crafted, one designed with a specific weakness. Dunkel had warned him that the blade was made to shatter the moment it clashed with a mana-infused sword. Back in the present, Randall laughs, thinking he's won as his mana-infused sword is about to shatter Klein's blade. As the swords connect, the blade shatters exactly as planned, creating the very opening our guy needed. With a chilling smile and glowing purple eyes, Klein reveals his trap is complete, declaring the broken blade is now the perfect weapon to hunt him. The roles have reversed. The lion is now stared down by a single feather, a symbol of the eagle's precision. Indeed, the shadow of the eagle, the patient hunter, now looms over the stunned and outmaneuvered lion. Klein grips the hilt of his now broken sword, which has become a deadly, jagged shiv in his hand. Using the sharp shard and his necromantic power, he darts forward and severs his opponent's hand at the wrist. The severed hand, still clutching its sword, thuds onto the blood-soaked ground. Rising from his seat, Duke Heinkel puts an end to the brutal spectacle, declaring, "That's enough." The stunned referee then officially declares the duel over, confirming Klein's victory. Meanwhile, Dunkel reflects in amazement that the young master flawlessly executed the footwork and sword path of a seasoned knight, despite his supposed lack of mana, and marvels at the brilliant strategy, deliberately baiting his opponent into breaking the sword, just to create an opening for a point-blank attack. He can only conclude that he has just witnessed the young master's perfect victory. On the field, Rando collapses to his knees, screaming in agony as he stares at his severed arm. Medics rush into the arena, frantically trying to stop the bleeding. While the medics cast a sleep spell, Klein stands by, looking unimpressed. With a curious, almost clinical detachment, he asks if the severed hand can be reattached. A medic explains it only needs basic healing magic and a cast for a prosthetic, to which Klein nonchalantly replies, "Is that all?" As his father approaches, he internally scoffs that healing magic hasn't improved at all in 200 years. The Duke eyes his son suspiciously, asking if he feels nothing after witnessing such a gruesome injury. Snapping back to reality, Klein remembers he's supposed to be a normal teenager, not the ancient necromancer Archimod. So he quickly feigns shock, wondering if he should pretend to be scared to appease him. Nearby, Count Delkin loses his mind, screaming in disbelief that his champion lost and complaining about how much money he spent. When Heinkel demands he honor their agreement, the enraged Count just screams, "No." The man wails that he's already lost his son and his knight, refusing to accept defeat. Suddenly, his outburst is cut short as he clutches his throat, unable to speak, as he sees a vision of his head being cut off from his body. A close-up reveals Klein's eye glowing with a sinister purple energy as he silently invokes the name of Delkin Conwell. An invisible force grips the Count, paralyzing him where he stands. His eyes widen in sheer terror, utterly confused about what's happening to his body. As he struggles against the unseen power, Klein steps forward to issue his command as the duel's victor. Using his necromantic authority, he commands the Count to confess his sins and kneel before the Master of the North. The spectral voice continues, commanding him to bow his head and beg for mercy under the weight of his sins. Invisible pressure forces the Count's head down, his body trembling with fear. In his terror, he hallucinates a horrifying spectral image of the necromancer Archimod looming over him. Sweating and shaking, his mind breaks under the overwhelming fear. Utterly defeated, Count Delkin is forced to his knees, whispering, "I was wrong." This is the work of Dead Man's Voice, a soul-crushing necromancer technique Klein is using to force a confession. As the spell induces extreme terror, the Count grovels on the ground, begging for forgiveness. Sobbing uncontrollably, he publicly confesses to insulting Klein's late mother, his mind completely shattered. The audience murmurs in shock, unable to believe they are seeing a powerful pillar of the Branch family crumble so pathetically. Holding his broken sword, Klein thinks to himself that his plan to reform the family begins now. He raises his blade and addresses the entire assembly, ready to make a grand declaration. After that, he firmly states his position as the challenger and rightful victor of the trial by combat. He then proudly claims his heritage as the son of the late Grand Duchess Claire Latalasis. He continues, identifying himself as the second son of Heinkel Rhineland, the strongest knight of the north, and with all eyes on him, he raises his broken sword and powerfully declares, "I am Klein Rhineland." The scene shifts dramatically as Priest Garrison enters a dark, ominous cathedral. Inside, a man prays to the god of light, asking for guidance on his perilous and painful path. Sunlight streams down onto a serene statue of an angel, a stark contrast to the darkness that follows. Garrison walks resolutely through the empty cathedral. He approaches and addresses his superior, Cardinal Morok. He then reports that his surveillance target, Klein, was attacked by a necromancer and his undead army, but before proceeding, he states that he needs to verify the Holy Order's intentions. The Cardinal callously dismisses his concerns, revealing that the attack was all part of the plan. He explains that the necromancer was merely a pawn, dispatched in cooperation with the Empire to incite fear among the people, and reveals the twisted logic. The fear caused by necromancers will drive countless people to seek out the Holy Order. Justifying the sacrifice of innocence, he claims it's a small price to pay to revive the Holy Order and spread God's will. Enraged by this blasphemy, Garrison snaps, violently grabbing the Cardinal by his throat. His face is a mask of pure fury as he condemns the man for making deals with heretics and falling for petty political games. The Cardinal chokes and sputters, shocked by the sudden and violent betrayal. In his final moments, the terrified man mouths a plea for someone to save him. A nearby statue's face is splattered with blood, signifying the brutal execution. Garrison has crushed the Cardinal's head with his bare hand, and he leaves the twitching corpse dangling in his grip. Then, a calm, sardonic voice emerges from the shadows, asking if he feels any better now. Archbishop Palimon L. walks through the carnage, wryly noting that Garrison has now killed more clergymen than the necromancers have. He then smirks, suggesting that the priest is hiding some dark secrets of his own. Garrison glares at him, demanding to know if this corrupt plan was his doing. Palimon casually steps over a corpse, admitting he merely authorized the plan and has brought some new information. Suddenly, the priest strikes him with a punch as he explains that it's about his surveillance target. But Palimon vanishes from sight and dodges the punch, and explains that the use of necromancy inevitably leaves a trace of its unique energy. He then presents a cross-shaped vial, revealing it contains the magical traces left behind by the necromancer Garrison had killed. The vial clearly shows two distinct types of energy, one from the Empire's corpse-raising soul-returning arts, and another, more ancient form of necromancy that manipulates souls directly. Palimon then drops a bombshell. The presence of two different traces means there were two necromancers at the scene. To illustrate his point, He explains that he's talking about Garrison's surveillance target, the second son of the Rhineland family. He leans in, infected in awe, preparing to reveal the target's true identity to the stunned priest. And Palimon delivers the final, shocking revelation: Klein Rhineland is a necromancer. The world crashes down around Garrison as he is forced to confront the horrifying truth about the boy he's been watching over. The scene shifts to a dark and stormy night at a remote, ominous-looking mine. In a brief flashback, a lone miner toils away, chipping at the valuable crystals within the earth. He pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, just as a sinister shadow looms over him. The miner turns in terror while an unseen force attacks him from behind. His screams echo through the chasm as he is dragged away into the darkness. Back in the present, a young maid named Erin laments that she's created a disaster. She reveals a crudely stitched, voodoo-like doll she made in the likeness of her young master Klein. A week after the trial by combat, Erin playfully teases Klein with the doll, laughing that it looks exactly like him. However, our guy reflects on his recent successes, starting with his victory over the champion Randell. He recalls using his dead man's voice technique to extract a confession and publicly announcing his existence, believing he would finally be acknowledged. But he grimaces at the realization that his 15-year-old body lacks the stamina to keep up with his ambitions. Erin pouts that Klein is mean for always reading by himself, to which he retorts, asking if she can't see that he's studying. But she dismisses his book as just a novel, insisting that he's basically playing anyway. Klein thinks to himself that while the cover might look like an ordinary novel, its contents are far more sinister. He flips through his secret grimoire, filled with personal notes on anatomy, magic circuits, and the dark arts of necromancy. The young master contemplates his current limitations, noting that he can only summon 11 skeletons and needs to research ways to increase his power. However, he worries about the damn priest bastard's Garrison, who is already suspicious and seems ready to exterminate any necromancer on sight. He desperately wonders how he can regain his original power and practice his necromancy without getting caught. As if on cue, his father, Duke Heinkel, presents a report of undead sightings at a nearby mine. Seeing the crude drawing of zombies, Klein has a revelation. This is the perfect opportunity. Without a moment's hesitation, he declares to his father, "I will go." He stands resolute before the Duke's desk, believing that real combat is the best form of research. Heinkel expresses his concern, mentioning that there have already been casualties from the undead attacks. Klein confidently assures his father it won't be a problem, convinced that this is his chance to use his powers and investigate the necromancer who previously attacked him. Just as our protagonist celebrates the chance to use necromancy freely, his plans are dashed when Dunkel cheerfully announces that the Duke has ordered him to come along as an escort. Frustrated, Klein thinks, "I should have known," while his escort naively comments on the beautiful night sky. Later, around a campfire, our guy kindly offers Dunkel a freshly grilled skewer of meat. At this, the knight says to the young master, "I should also do some work." Our guy presents a lump of charcoal, sarcastically asking if Dunkel can't see that his help isn't helping at all, and internally mocks his knight commander, realizing Dunkel is completely useless when it comes to survival skills like cooking or hunting. As a dejected Dunkel apologizes, Klein tells him to forget it and just eat. But then, Klein makes a slip, boasting that after spending a decade on the run from Allied knight orders, this is nothing. His strange comment gives Dunkel pause, who watches his young master with a new sense of suspicion. He notes that Klein is very different from others his age, citing his hidden sword talent and his immense spirit during combat. Because of all these strange inconsistencies, he admits that he sometimes thinks that Klein might actually be the reincarnation of the great demon, Archimad. Dunkel's guess hits dangerously close to the truth, leaving Klein utterly speechless. Panicking, our guy forces a laugh and warns him to never say that in front of Priest Garrison, while Dunkel casually agrees. He explains that Archimad was a demon who turned millions into the undead. In a fit of pique, Klein angrily hurls his food into the campfire. Dunkel is momentarily startled by the sudden burst of wind and flame. With a chilling glare, Klein warns his escort to never ever speak of that matter again. Dunkel is taken aback by the intensity and seriousness of the young master's reaction. Their tense standoff is suddenly shattered by a blood-curdling scream from the nearby village. The scene shifts to the mining village, now shrouded in a deathly silence. Suddenly, a horde of undead attack, sending the villagers running for their lives. The glowing-eyed zombies swarm through the streets, hungry for the living. Just then, Dunkel leaps into the fray, his sword glowing with holy energy as he cuts down the undead. The knight then turns and shouts in concern for the young master. However, Klein needs no help, effortlessly dispatching a zombie with his own purple-infused blade. He calmly turns to his escort and asks, "What are you doing?" and coolly instructs him to go save the people, implying he will handle things here. Surprised but obedient, Dunkel acknowledges the order and rushes to protect the villagers. The head of the undead that Klein dispatched clatters to the ground, its glowing eyes extinguished. As the villagers thank Dunkel, one is shocked to learn that their savior is a Rhineland. Dunkel asks one of the villagers how long the undead have been appearing. Meanwhile, Klein examines the fallen undead, confirming that it's the same reanimation magic used by the Necromancer who previously attacked him. A terrified villager explains that the undead started appearing 2 months ago, right after the mine was closed off, and that people started going missing. The villager then reveals a horrifying truth. The undead are all residents of their village, a revelation that shocks even Klein. Suddenly, a distraught villager rushes forward and grabs Klein, demanding to know if he is a Rhineland. As Dunkel moves to intervene, the villager screams at Klein, demanding an answer. The man wails that they begged the Rhinelands for help for 2 whole months and received no reply. He then gestures angrily at the corpse of an undead at Klein's feet. In a heart-wrenching cry, he reveals that the undead Klein just killed was his father. Overcome with despair, the man collapses, screaming, "Why do we have to suffer like this?" For the first time, the villager's raw grief seems to strike a chord with the reincarnated necromancer. Klein is hit with a jarring flashback, the man's suffering reminding him of the countless people who cursed his name as Archimod. The weight of the villager's sorrow seems to break through Klein's detached facade. He lashes out, telling the man to shut up and angrily questioning why any of this should be his fault. The villager is stunned into silence by Klein's cold and seemingly callous response. Klein clarifies that he wasn't the one who turned the man's father into an undead, telling him to direct his anger at the correct target. As Dunkel tries to take control of the situation, Klein stops him and begins to channel his own magic. Dunkel watches in confusion as Klein begins a solemn incantation, commanding the innocent spirits who died in sorrow. As the dead bodies begin to twitch with blue energy, he declares, "I, Klein Rhineland, shall uphold your will." With a burst of power, he commands the lost souls to follow his guidance. Ethereal blue flames erupt from the corpses, cleansing them of their necrotic taint. From the bodies, the spirits of the fallen villagers rise, freed from their undead prisons. Klein communicates with the spirit of the miner. In an ancient tongue, the spirits tell Klein their story and their final wish. After listening intently, he solemnly replies, "Understood." Dunkel looks on in utter disbelief, recognizing the phenomenon as soul resonance, and realizes Klein is using a legendary technique not seen in 200 years, one used to liberate the dead during a great plague. The distraught villager gets one last look at his father as a peaceful spirit, whispering his name in tearful recognition. The spirit of the father gives a final nod of gratitude before dissolving into particles of light. The freed souls of the villagers ascend into the heavens, finally at peace. Having settled the matter in the village, Klein and Dunkel walk toward the mountains. They continue their mission, heading towards the mine where the undead originated. A now calm villager points them in the right direction, telling them the mine is straight up the mountain path. As they walk, Dunkel's mind races, and he asks Klein what he spoke about with the spirits. Klein dismisses the question, saying it was nothing much. He explains that the spirits thanked him for helping them pass on, but then adds a crucial detail, and reveals they were also pleading with him to get revenge on their behalf, a statement that makes Dunkel stop in his tracks. The word revenge triggers the knight's suspicion, connecting the dots in his mind. He flashes back to his joke about Archimod and Klein's terrifyingly serious reaction, realizing there's a pattern. Then, in a swift, decisive motion, he places the blade against Klein's throat and directly demands, "Who exactly are you?" The narrative flashes back to Captain Dunkel's first encounter with a young, solemn Klein Rhineland, who had just returned from a 7-year confinement in a monastery. He recalls the dark rumors surrounding the young master, who had shockingly called himself Archimod upon returning to the estate. What surprised the captain most was the boy's pitch-black gaze, a look so empty it seemed impossible for it to belong to a child. His memory then turns to the unsettling events that began with a scream and the discovery of a dead cat. The first was found in the estate's kitchen, horrifying the maids and kicking off a series of grim discoveries. Soon after, a second dead cat was found in the backyard garden, followed by a third the very next day, spreading unease throughout the staff. The body count continued to rise, with the fourth and fifth cats being discovered in quick succession. The grisly discoveries continued, eventually reaching a somber count of 6 dead cats on the estate grounds. In total, a staggering 7 cats were found dead, casting a dark shadow over the Rhineland estate. Whispers and rumors flew among the staff, questioning if Klein truly used necromancy as a baby, or if he had really claimed to be the devil Archimod. The consensus among the frightened staff was that the rumors were true. They believed his was a cursed bloodline, and he was the one responsible. In contrast to the tense atmosphere, Dunkel noted that the young master simply stared out the window, completely uninterested in the rumors swirling around him. He considered the popular suspicion that the boy was behind the incidents, but reasoned that Klein was simply too young to be involved. Just as he was dismissing the possibility, however, he noticed something that caught his attention. Late at night, he saw the flickering light of a lantern as someone began to move through the darkened halls. It was young Master Klein, cloaked and carrying a lantern, walking purposefully through the estate. Wondering where the boy could possibly be going at such a late hour, the captain decided to follow him. He trailed Klein as the boy headed out of the manor and into the windy, rustling forest. He noticed the small sword at the boy's hip, adding to the mystery of his late-night excursion. However, he cautiously kept his distance, following the single point of light as Klein led him down a stone path through the woods. Their journey ended under the call of a crow at an unsettling destination, the cemetery. Confused as to why the young master would come to such a place, Dunkel quietly approached to investigate. Unable to see clearly due to the tombstones, he debated getting closer to see what the boy was doing. As he got a clearer view, his eyes widened in complete and utter shock at the scene before him. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing the young master doing in the middle of the cemetery at night. Instead of dark magic, Dunkel found Klein carefully laying out all 7 of the dead cats, preparing to give them a proper burial. When confronted, the boy calmly told the stunned knight that he was performing funeral rites for the deceased animals, and explained that after examining the lesions, he determined the cats had died of an infectious disease, harmless to humans but fatal to animals. As he carefully cleaned one of the bodies, he explained that they must be buried properly to prevent the disease from spreading further. Dunkel, concerned, told the young master to stop, fearing he would ruin his hands, but Klein simply dismissed his worry. He looked up with a profound maturity and stated that, regardless of the task, someone had to do it anyway. This simple act of compassion and responsibility left Dunkel speechless, cementing his loyalty to the young master. The flashback concludes, bringing us back to the present where Dunkel, sword drawn, finally asks Klein to reveal his true identity. But instead of answering directly, the young man turns the situation around, telling the captain he wants to ask something first. With the sword still at his back, he tests his knight by asking if he remembers the first saying of Berkel Rhineland. Dunkel, though tense, correctly recites the family's core belief. It is one's actions, not their roots, that define a being. Klein affirms this is why Dunkel, a peasant, could become a captain, and why he, the son of a foreign mother, is still alive, and tells him that since he's been with him the most since the monastery, the decision of who he is rests with him. With his life on the line, Klein gives Dunkel an ultimatum: if you believe I'm Archimod, you can strike me down. After a tense pause, Dunkel lowers his sword, admitting that he hasn't decided yet and is certainly not convinced. He then declares with conviction that the one he serves is Klein Rhineland, not some atrocious devil of the continent. Klein is visibly surprised by his knight's unwavering declaration of loyalty. With a slight smile, he accepts his knight's trust, thanking him for the compliment. Their trust reaffirmed, the pair finally enter the ominous creaking structure of the abandoned mine. Immediately upon entering, they are greeted by a floor littered with bones and skulls. The mine is vast and filled with the remains of the fallen, hinting at the danger that lies ahead. Dunkel holds his torch high, remarking on the pungent smell of corpses that hangs heavy in the air. Their worst fears are confirmed as they spot figures shambling in the darkness. The smell is from moving corpses. While Dunkel spots at least 7 undead, Klein prepares for battle, gathering necromantic energy and calling upon his servants. With a powerful incantation, he summons his own army of elite, armored skeletons from the very ground. Dunkel turns, shocked and startled by the sudden and powerful display of necromancy right beside him. Without hesitation, Klein gives a single command to his newly summoned skeletons: charge. The summoned skeletons, with their glowing eyes and formidable builds, roar to life and surge forward. The mine's lesser undead turn to face the new threat, their shambling pace no match for the charging skeletons. Klein's forces make quick work of the ghouls, tearing them apart with overwhelming strength and speed. Dunkel watches in disbelief, questioning if skeletons that powerful and terrifying can even exist. Klein nonchalantly notes his knight's fascination, commenting that Dalton's mercenaries had the exact same reaction. The one-sided battle rages on as Klein's skeletons continue to dismantle the ghouls with brutal efficiency. As his skeletons clear a path, Dunkel calls out to Klein, urging him forward through the carnage. Suddenly, a terrifying roar echoes from deeper within the mine, and Dunkel braces himself for the next wave. Just then, he anxiously reports that he can hear about 40 more undead approaching, warning his master that they are outnumbered. Unfazed by the odds, Klein simply begins a new incantation to bolster his forces. He casts a spell over the fallen ghouls, commanding them to free their souls and obey his command. Dunkel watches in awe as his master converts the defeated undead, turning the enemy soldiers into his own allies. Klein casually explains that converting subdued undead is just a basic tactic when necromancers fight each other. Assessing his now much larger force, he coolly states that this should be enough to put up a fight, leaving Dunkel speechless. The newly reinforced army stands poised as the next wave of ghouls charges toward them from deeper in the mine. Just then Klein takes command, ordering his vanguard forward while telling Dunkel to run with him into the fray. The two forces clash as Klein's undead legion meets the oncoming horde. The reanimated ghouls are swiftly dispatched by his superior skeletal warriors. The battle is a flurry of spectral energy and shattering bone as his forces dominate the enemy. Like a true general, Klein commands his rearguard to support the attack, pushing his army to break through the enemy line. The enemy horde is effortlessly crushed under the coordinated assault of his powerful undead. The skeletons leap and tear through the remaining ghouls, showcasing their superior agility and power. Dunkel finds it hard to believe what he's seeing, noting that skeletons are typically low-tier undead, yet these move with impossible skill. He marvels that Klein's undead fight with the discipline and tactics of an actual, living army. After the battle, blood drips in the eerie silence of the now-cleared section of the mine. They stand amidst the fallen, having successfully annihilated a force more than 4 times their size. While Dunkel is still processing their impossible victory, Klein informs him that from here on out, it's just the two of them. He looks back at his knight and says, "You said you'd believe in me, then believe in me until the end." Leaving their undead army behind, the two proceed alone into the darker, deeper parts of the mine. Dunkel notes that they seem to have ventured quite deep into the cavernous mine. But as he wonders how much further they must go, a single drop of fresh blood splatters onto his cheek. His train of thought is interrupted by a faint, desperate human voice pleading, "Kill me." Startled to hear a human voice, he raises his torch and calls out, asking if anyone is there. He then shouts that they are here to save them, but is only met with a pained silence, and the desperate voice repeats its simple, horrifying plea, "Kill me." Figures. As Dunkel raises his torch, the light reveals a horrifying sight. Countless people, the missing villagers, are hanging from the ceiling. By looking at them, our guy explains that the villagers who are reported missing appear to have been kidnapped and used as tools for reanimation magic. Suddenly, a new voice echoes from the darkness, commending him for understanding the situation so well. A mysterious cloaked woman appears, explaining that reanimation magic requires a massive quantity of high-quality bodies. She then looks directly at him, stating that this is basic knowledge among necromancers, questioning him with her gaze. Lowering her hood, she reveals her face, remarking that she never thought she would meet him in a place like this. The beautiful red-haired necromancer greets him with a knowing smile. "It's been a while, Devil of the Continent, Lord Archimod." Klein's eyes widen in absolute shock, stunned to be recognized and addressed by his former name and title. In a lighthearted bonus scene, Aaron's voice cheers, "Cookie," to celebrate a past victory. The scene is a flashback to just after the trial by combat, where Klein is congratulated on his hard-won victory. As Klein, Dunkel, and a happy Aaron walk away, Klein decides to change his clothes before reporting to the Duke. While walking, he glances to the side, sensing that something is there. But he dismisses the feeling, thinking he imagined someone was there, unaware that Commander Laya is watching them. Hidden around the corner, a flustered Commander Laya questions her own actions. Blushing and clutching her chest, she wonders to herself, "Why am I hiding?" after watching him walk by. The scene moves to the present as our guy recalls a lesson on the origins of necromancy, defining it as the art of summoning souls to receive oracles. However, after one catastrophic day, necromancers became objects of absolute terror. This event was the Archimod incident, where tens of millions of his undead minions ravaged the continent. The devastating war only concluded when the hero Burkel Rhineland finally struck down the master necromancer Archimod. In the aftermath, many tried to replicate his power, but their research was limited to simple reanimation magic. As a result, modern necromancers have been reduced to second-rate magicians who can only raise corpses for battle. Klein internally mocks the woman before him, thinking she is a prime example of these inferior modern necromancers. Just then, she introduces herself as Pale and, to Klein's shock, addresses him as Lord Archimod. She stands confidently opposite Klein and his knight Dunkel in the massive cavern. Dunkel is confused by the name Archimod, but Klein confirms he heard it too. Pale then begins to unleash her power, radiating an incredible amount of mana. As she does, Klein astutely observes that she has imbued magic directly into her robe, a high-level technique. And he notes with suspicion that, as far as he knows, only the Rhineland family is capable of infusing mana into soft materials. Ever loyal, Dunkel draws his sword, furiously demanding she not call his master by the name of scum like Archimod. Pale playfully dismisses his protective outburst, feigning innocence for being rude to the young master of Rhineland. She states that based on the rumors and the magic she senses, she knows exactly what he is, and declares with certainty that he is a necromancer, just like her. But she finds it odd for a necromancer to be using a sword. Ignoring her musings, Dunkel demands to know what she did to the villagers and who sent her. Pale scoffs at the question, retorting that a true necromancer does not rely on simple tools like swords. Then, she begins to gather her dark energy. Declaring that true necromancers command souls and control death, she starts her spell. Shadowy forms begin to rise from the corpses of the fallen villagers around them. The souls of the dead are violently ripped from their bodies, and the screaming souls merge into a terrifying vortex of dark, necromantic energy. Pale announces she will demonstrate the meaning of true necromancy, and coalesces the soul energy into a powerful, shimmering core. Suddenly, a grotesque, monstrous hand bursts forth from the mass of bodies and souls. With immense pride, she unveils the masterpiece she has dedicated her life to creating. The massive creature made of stitched-together corpses slams onto the cavern floor. Dunkel can only stare in horror, muttering that the monstrous creation is insane. He admits he has never witnessed such a horrifying creature on any battlefield. He then identifies the amalgamation of bodies as a powerful cyclops. Meanwhile, she affectionately greets her creation, cooing at it as if it were a pet. She gently caresses the monster's face before whispering a single, brutal command. She orders her cyclops to crush Klein and Dunkel into a pulp. At her command, the monster lunges forward with startling speed. Even the experienced Dunkel is shocked by the creature's immense agility, and he warns the young master that it's dangerous. But suddenly, our guy shoves him out of the path of the charging beast. Just then, the beast's attack connects with our guy. The attack sends him flying, and crushes him against a wall with brutal force. The Cyclops looms over him, its attack seemingly successful. The monster then raises its foot to finish him off with a deadly stomp. But suddenly, the heroic Dunkel impales the monster with his sword. Gritting his teeth against the immense pressure, he screams at the beast, telling it not to dare lay a finger on the young master. And with brutal force, he cuts off the beast's leg. Klein watches, stunned. Even Pale appears surprised by the knight's incredible strength and loyalty. The monster screams in pain, but the necromancer remains unimpressed. She mockingly claps, sarcastically calling the knight's attack a splendid strike. After that, she smugly states that his level of talent isn't enough to even leave a scratch on her masterpiece. Dunkel stares in disbelief, realizing its leg is growing back. The fully regenerated monster raises his hand to attack him. Racked with guilt, Dunkel realizes the manaless Klein had just thrown himself in harm's way to save him. Suddenly, he sidesteps the attack, and can't believe he dared to suspect such a person of being the villainous Archimod. Filled with renewed purpose, he decides the only way to repay his shame is through action. The Cyclops lets out a furious roar, annoyed by the persistent knight. Dunkel goes on the offensive, unleashing a furious barrage of strikes while vowing to protect his master with his life. Despite his valiant efforts, the monster's flesh continues to squirm and regenerate almost instantly. Frustrated, he curses, realizing the creature is regenerating too quickly. Leaping onto the monster, he searches for a way to stop its endless regeneration. He resolves to strike its head quickly, hoping to end the fight. With a powerful war cry, he drives his sword into the creature's head. The sword slices deep into the Cyclops' skull. But instead of falling, the monster catches the stunned knight in its grasp and brutally throws him. He crashes into the wall. His body is flung against the cave wall, leaving a crater. After that, he falls limply to the ground, defeated. Pale seems genuinely moved by the display, remarking that the knight's loyalty is beyond her imagination. A flashback reveals her past, where countless experiments led her to create a unique undead variant no one else could touch. This success led her to become certain of her own genius, and she was convinced that her creation is the product of pure, innate talent. Her conviction grew, believing that not even the legendary Archimod could create such a being. In her mind, she had proven that she possessed a talent that surpassed all others. With Dunkel defeated, she gloats that she has finally surpassed Archimod's knowledge. The colossal Cyclops looms over the knight's unconscious body, ready to finish him. But then, Klein's voice cuts through the tension as he calmly mentions the core connection point and begins to lecture, explaining this is the first key to synthesizing a Cyclops. He continues, detailing the second key, the core suture, a pathway for formulas that binds the corpses together. After that, he reveals this suture is the source of the Cyclops' powerful regenerative abilities. Our protagonist casually explains that attacking the body is futile, and that destroying a single, hidden core is all it takes to kill it. He then calmly explains that a Cyclops' core is never stationary, as it's a vital point linked directly to its death. An X-ray view reveals the core moving through a complex network of pathways within the monster's body. Pale smirks, declaring it impossible to find the constantly moving core. She proudly reminds him that this is a masterpiece she dedicated her life to creating. Asserting that he is nothing in the face of her talent, she commands her Cyclops to crush him. The monster dashes toward our guy. His hand descends to snatch him up. But the word talent triggers a flashback for Klein, and he recalls memories from his past life as Archimod, where he effortlessly sliced through hundreds of Cyclopes. The sensation of finding and destroying their cores is something he can never forget. Back in the present, he leaps and swings his mana-infused sword. Pale's eyes widen in shock as he moves in a blur of motion. In a flash of brilliant purple energy, he unleashes a devastating slash. The single, elegant arc of energy cuts through the monster, homing in on its weakness. The very concept of Pale's talent shatters as his attack strikes the moving core with impossible precision. The core explodes, and with it, the source of the Cyclops' power. A horrified Pale can only stammer, "What is?" as she watches her life's work crumble to dust. With his eyes glowing, he fully channels the intimidating aura of his past self, Archimod. He looks down on the defeated Necromancer and condescendingly tells her that if this was her life's work, she should consider making it a hobby in her next life. Pale finds herself in a void, pondering the nature of death and karma. Her contemplation, however, is shattered by a sudden, jarring realization. She feels the cold, dark water of this strange realm, questioning her reality. Looking up, she is horrified to see endless rows of coffins stretching into the sky. Panicked, she demands to know where she is, only for a voice to inform her that she has arrived in the world beyond souls. Suddenly, Archimod appears before her, coldly declaring that she is in the afterlife. In disbelief, she screams that it's impossible and demands to be released. He dismisses her panic, stating she clearly doesn't understand her current predicament. With a chilling calm, he announces that it is time for her judgment to begin. He then begins to list her sins, his words echoing in the terrifying void. Ascending into the air, he declares that he will deliver her judgment in his own name. Pale is stunned, recognizing the legendary name Archimod as a disaster recorded in history. She recalls his fearsome titles, Monarch of the Grand Army of Death, Devil of the Continent, and the Master of Millions of Undead. The King of Necromancers points at her and commands her to come closer. She flinches, terrified by the overwhelming presence of the legendary figure. He continues, identifying her by name as he lists her transgressions. Pale realizes with horror that her body is moving against her will, drawn towards him. Archimod recounts her heinous crimes, turning innocents into test subjects and torturing them to satisfy her own desires. She desperately denies the reality before her, insisting that Archimod is supposed to have died 200 years ago. And yet, he accuses her of also using the dead as her tools, a cardinal sin in his eyes. Archimod delivers his verdict with icy finality. He declares that from now on, she will become his tool. As the coffins behind him begin to open, Pale panics, trying to resist being pulled towards her fate. She screams in terror, questioning what it means to become his tool. Her pleas are ignored as she is forcibly dragged into an awaiting, ornate coffin. She lets out a final, desperate scream of, "No." As the coffin seals, Archimod mockingly asks if she is afraid of dying. He then offers a twisted reassurance, drawing his sword. Promising they will meet again soon, he pierces the coffin with his blade. Pale awakens from the nightmare, screaming in terror. Back in the mine, she realizes with relief that it was all just a dream and she didn't die. Dunkel, however, watches in disbelief, utterly shocked that she survived as just a disembodied head. Klein looks down at the screaming head with a deadpan expression while Dunkel remains bewildered. Dunkel struggles to process what happened, realizing Klein single-handedly defeated the monstrous Cyclops while he was unconscious. Klein ignores Pale's screaming and tells a still dazed Dunkel that it's time to begin. A confused and terrified Pale demands to know what happened to her body, while Klein kneels before her disembodied head, asking if she has finally come to her senses. He coldly states that she should now understand the gravity of her situation. Pale freezes as she recognizes the voice speaking to her. The voice triggers the memory of Archimod from her nightmare. Her eyes widen in horror as Klein confirms his identity, reminding her of his promise that they would meet again. The horrifying realization dawns on her. It wasn't a dream, and the rumors about Klein Rhineland must be true. Before she can scream Archimod's name, he presses a finger to her lips, silencing her. Leaning in close, Klein reveals that he needs information from her. He demands to know everything: who sent her, how many others there are, and all the details of their mission in the north. He offers her a choice: tell him everything for a painless death, or refuse and face eternal life. Pale shudders in terror, realizing he means eternal life in her current disembodied state. He confirms her fears, stating she will remain like this forever if she doesn't cooperate. Leaning over her, he challenges her to see how long she can last and mockingly asks if they can proceed without her shedding any tears. Sometime later, Dunkel finishes writing in a book and looks up from his notes. The captain confirms he has written down everything Klein dictated from the now compliant Necromancer. Announcing he's sick of the mine, Klein prepares to leave, but Pale desperately calls out to him. She anxiously asks what will happen to her now, and reminds him that she told him everything he ordered, looking to Dunkel for support. The young man pauses and remembers his promise with a sinister smirk. He confirms he promised to kill her, and a relieved Pale thanks God, eager to finally die. However, he assures her that he keeps his promises, conjuring a ball of glowing blue mana. He then gently places the soul-liberating spell over her head, but he cruelly adds that she just needs to hold out for about a week. Klein reveals her true fate. He summoned a swarm of cockroaches who will take care of killing her. Her eyes widen in absolute horror at the approaching swarm. As the insects crawl all over her face, her screams of pain and terror fill the mine. Klein turns away with a satisfied smile and thanks her for becoming his tool, leaving her to be consumed. As they walk away from the mine, her final, horrified screams of Archimad echo behind them. The scene shifts back to the stately Rhineland estate. Heinkel Rhineland studies a report with a pensive expression. He reads aloud the disturbing news that the Empire has unleashed necromancers in the north, while the Holy Order does nothing. Klein confirms that his report is accurate. He details the scale of the threat, noting 150 undead in the mine and many more missing villagers, all while the local nobles are distracted by politics. Heinkel orders his butler, Berkman, to dispatch the night order and request reinforcements from the border. The family head then looks at his son with newfound respect, telling him he has done a great thing. Klein humbly credits Dunkel for his survival, while internally noting they're keeping his necromancy a secret for now. He worries slightly, hoping that the captain, who has a strict no-necromancy policy, will keep his secret. His father tells him to take something. He then stands and presents his son with a small metallic object. Impressed by Klein's actions, he has decided to accelerate his plans for him. He gives him the wolf-head token of a Rhineland knight, and officially appoints Klein as an apprentice knight, a role he readily accepts. Klein proudly pins the token to his collar, thinking the position is more than enough for his purposes. Heinkel watches his son with a complex, unreadable expression. Dismissing him to rest, the patriarch watches as Klein thanks him and departs. The heavy doors close behind him. Butler Berkman muses on the young master's incredible feat of defeating so many undead and a necromancer, even with Dunkel's help. Heinkel instructs his butler to send a letter to his brother, despite Berkman's doubts that the man would come. The letter is to contain a very specific, intriguing message. Heinkel declares that the genius you have been searching for your entire life is right here, referring to Klein. Meanwhile, Klein walks through the estate, amused by his new title of apprentice knight. He celebrates the fact that the knight's barracks are a classified military zone, meaning not even priest garrison can enter without permission. Our protagonist smirks, realizing this is the perfect way to escape garrison's constant suspicion and purification rituals. He reaffirms his resolve to restore the Rhineland family to its former glory, a decision made the day he killed Dalton. As he ponders his next move, he's suddenly interrupted. His maid Erin tackles him from behind, shouting his name. Wincing in pain, he jokingly asks if they're out of cookies again, lamenting his possibly broken vertebra. She indignantly denies that cookies are her only concern, though he notices a crumb on her mouth. After a bit of playful banter, Erin remembers why she came running, and urgently informs a suddenly frozen Klein that Priest Garrison is here. His brief moment of triumph evaporates into dread. He is haunted by memories of Garrison's fanatical violence and his own past life's demise. His celebration is cut short as the priest appears behind him, asking if his mission went well. A terrified Klein turns to face the man who has been waiting for him. Garrison addresses him formally, his expression unreadable but deeply unnerving. The scene transitions to a flashback in which a frantic attendant searches for a young, missing Klein. Servants scour the woods, calling out for the young master, who has once again disappeared. The attendants grow increasingly worried, reporting to each other that they can't find the boy anywhere. One man panics, realizing Klein has vanished right before his purification ritual with the very angry priest Garrison. Meanwhile, hiding in a tree, Klein scoffs at the idea of forgiveness, recalling the last time Garrison had strung him up naked. One of the attendants says, "Let's check around the mansion first," while our guy internally says, "All of you just get lost." Having successfully escaped, the exhausted young boy dozes off on a high tree branch. He's jolted awake by a nightmare, muttering the name of his tormentor, Garrison. Realizing it's now night, Klein wonders just how long he was asleep. Figuring the search party has given up, he begins to climb down, ready to head back. However, his descent is cut short by a startling sound, and he realizes he's not alone. To his absolute horror, the boy finds himself cornered in the tree by a family of massive northern gray bears. A narrative box introduces the northern gray bear as a large and aggressive predator native to the region. Its claws are described as being perfectly adapted for tearing flesh, emphasizing the mortal danger he's in. Without his necromancy, the boy knows he's just a meal and decides his only option is to wait for them to leave. Shivering from the cold, he curses the harsh northern weather he finds himself in. He then bitterly reflects on his past life as Archimod, who gave his all for the Northerners who died unjustly. And he laments the cruel irony of being reborn into the family of Burkle, the very hero who killed him. Despairing, he realizes that even in this new life, he's still constantly running away from his problems. Frustration boils over as the powerless boy clenches his fist in the freezing cold. His mind flashes back to the cries of his enemies, all of them demanding the death of Archimod. He also remembers the isolating whispers from his childhood, with people calling him a cursed child. Huddled and alone, the young boy feels the biting cold seep into his bones. Suddenly, he feels a surprising warmth envelop him. He looks up and finds he's being carried on the broad back of Priest Garrison. Garrison calmly checks on him, asking if he's conscious. Still dazed, Klein weakly asks if he froze to death. The priest chuckles, reassuring him that it's not hell, and that he simply found him unconscious in a tree. When Klein asks about the bears, Garrison casually mentions that he is already taking care of them. Klein protests being carried by his tormentor, but the priest notes his fever and insists he come along. Confused and feverish, Klein asks the priest why he bothered to save him at all. He pushes further, questioning why Garrison, who seemed to want him dead more than anyone, would rescue him. Garrison offers a cryptic response, stating that stars don't create their own darkness. Gazing at the sky, he continues his philosophical lesson, saying that they merely shine in their place. This was his way of explaining the difference between right and wrong, even as the bear cubs look on in confusion. He explains that as a man of God, he has no right to sever the future potential of a young being. Klein internally scoffs at the hypocrisy, remembering all the water tortures he's endured from this very man. However, Garrison adds a chilling caveat: if that young being chooses darkness and becomes the true Archimod, the weight of his unspoken threat hangs in the cold night air. As a leaf disintegrates, the priest advises the boy to be careful. The flashback concludes with Garrison's ominous promise, "Because I will kill you with my own hands." Back in the present day, the tense reunion between Klein and Garrison begins. Garrison greets the young master, acknowledging it has been a while since they've last seen each other. A visibly nervous Klein agrees, sweat beading on his brow as he faces him. Garrison explains his absence, stating he had urgent business to attend to at the Holy Order. He then produces a cross-shaped vial, mentioning an old friend gave him something interesting. Klein's eyes widen in absolute shock as he recognizes the vial for what it truly is. He realizes with dawning horror that it's an ectoplasm, a device that contains spiritual energy, and that it must hold his own magi. Garrison begins his interrogation, recapping the appearance of a necromancer during the forest attack, and confirms that he personally dealt with the hooded figure. However, the priest reveals there's a problem with the official story. With a calm but menacing tone, he declares that the ectoplasm detected the presence of not one, but two necromancers. Though Garrison's voice remains even, Klein can sense the furious, pounding rage emanating from the priest. As the legendary Archimod, Klein had faced countless powerful monsters in his past life. Yet, faced with this zealous priest, his very instincts are screaming a primal warning. The full power of his instincts tell him that Garrison is a threat on an entirely different level. Klein's mind races, but he knows he's too inexperienced in this body to copy the priest's techniques and survive the encounter. However, he grimly assesses his chances against the man, concluding that it's utterly impossible. Cutting through Klein's thoughts, Garrison issues a direct and terrifying command: use necromancy. Right now. He then offers a sliver of hope, saying that if it's simple corpse magic, it will only warrant a report to the Order. However, if Klein's power manipulates souls, a technique akin to that person, Archimod, Garrison makes it clear that such a revelation means the boy will not escape death. The priest's ultimatum echoes the hateful cries from Archimod's past. Klein smirks, finding it darkly funny that this ultimatum comes from the very man who water tortures him daily, and tells Garrison that someone he used to know, Burkle, said something similar. He then recalls Burkle's words about protecting the future of children. Klein now understands that this warped principle is the foundation of the justice Garrison believes in. Garrison is momentarily stunned that the boy understands his actions weren't driven by simple hatred. Klein accepts his past life's end, stating that as Archimod he was defeated and he died. His past self knelt in defeat, but his present self will not. With a newfound fire, he cuts the priest off, telling him to stop the bullshit. A defiant smile spreads across his face as he declares that he will be the one to decide his own future. To Garrison's surprise, he announces that he won't run away anymore. Resigned, Garrison concludes that if the boy won't cooperate, it can't be helped. He decides he has no choice but to force him to reveal his powers. As Garrison charges forward, his eyes glowing with holy power, Klein knows the fight is on. His mind races as he realizes he has to dodge the incoming attack at all costs. Focusing all his senses, he prepares to evade the priest's lunge. With intense concentration, he prepares to make his move. He grits his teeth, knowing everything depends on dodging this one attack. With a burst of agility, Klein successfully throws himself out of the path of Garrison's attack. The priest is momentarily surprised that the boy managed to evade his initial strike. A brief, triumphant smile crosses Klein's face. He actually did it. However, the ectoplasm vial falls to the ground and shatters, covering the floor with its contents. The commotion causes the nearby servants to scream in terror. Chaos erupts as they panic, unable to believe the priest just attacked the young master. Seeing a momentary opening, Klein reaches for his sword to launch a counterattack. But to his shock, he finds the hilt of his sword is gone. Garrison holds the boy's sword aloft, tauntingly asking if this is what he's looking for. In a flash, he demonstrates his superior combat prowess by disarming Klein and tossing the sword away. Klein breaks into a cold sweat, realizing the priest's intent is genuine. Garrison confirms his fears, stating a necromancer like him doesn't need a sword as he prepares the final blow. The priest's fist hurtles toward Klein's face, leaving him no room to escape. Bracing for impact, Klein shuts his eyes, seemingly accepting his fate. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave erupts, stopping Garrison's attack cold. The force of the impact is so great that it shatters the massive windows of the Grand Hall. The debris fly around everywhere. As the dust begins to settle, a cough breaks the stunned silence. Just then, a voice bellows for the guards. The priest's anger turns to shock as he recognizes the newcomer. It is Duke Heinkel Rhineland, Klein's father, who stands between them and sternly demands an explanation. The imposing figure of the seventh Duke of the Rhineland family has arrived to intervene. With his eyes glowing with power, Heinkel delivers a final chilling warning to the priest: "Explain yourself before my sword cuts you down." Garrison faces the enraged Duke, recognizing the serious threat in his voice. As Klein watches the confrontation, he confirms to himself that, just as expected, his father has intervened. With a confident smirk, he muses that everything is proceeding exactly according to his plan. As the tension escalates, Dunkel commands the household guards to move to their positions. He points his men towards the source of the commotion, urging them to hurry. The Rhineland Knights quickly form a protective circle around both the Duke and young Master Klein. Dunkel halts his men, shocked by the sheer magnitude of power radiating from the two powerhouses. Klein, however, internally reveals his strategy. Stalling for time was sure to attract the knights, who are acutely sensitive to hostility. And the plan was a success, as the entire household guard is now present, a necessary measure when facing the formidable proxy Garrison. Surrounded by knights, Duke Heinkel asks again if Garrison was truly attempting to attack his son. Garrison calmly defends his actions, reminding the Duke that Klein used necromancy and that he must know what that implies. Heinkel retorts that outside the jurisdiction of the Holy Kingdom, there is no law on the continent that forbids the use of necromancy. The priest argues that Heinkel, of all people, should understand the dire consequences necromancy will have on the young master's life. But the Duke declares that his son has already suffered for 7 years due to trivial rumors, and as his father, he will not allow it to continue. With unwavering resolve, he forbids the proxy from laying another hand on his son, and puts his full authority behind the command, telling Garrison to withdraw his killing intent unless he wishes to make an enemy of House Rhineland. In response, Garrison erupts into chilling, manic laughter, stunning both Heinkel and Klein. The priest begins to recite Holy Scripture, vowing to confess his faith and not entrust his heart to a non-believer. He finishes his oath before God, declaring that he shall show no mercy to heretics. With a fanatical gleam in his eyes, he resolved to carry out his judgment upon Klein is absolute. Just then, his body erupts in golden holy energy, as he prepares to unleash a devastating blow. The priest's eye widens with zealous fury as he focuses his immense power. The terrified knights shout warnings, telling each other not to recklessly approach the dangerous clash of titans. Dunkel clenches his fist, recognizing the terrifying, world-ending power being unleashed by the two men, and declares that they are the ones who are truly in danger now. Heinkel unleashes his own crimson aura. The sheer pressure from their combined power begins to crack the very foundations of the mansion. Heinkel, however, gives the priest one last warning, telling him to lower his fist before it's too late. Garrison ignores the warning, shouting that his attack is God's divine judgment upon House Rhineland. Just then, he lunges forward, shattering the ground beneath his foot. Heinkel channels his family's power through his blade, preparing to counter the holy attack. The Duke's crimson sword arc then moves directly towards his target. However, Garrison easily deflects the powerful attack with his fist, and lunges forward for the finishing blow. Just as he closes the distance, he gathers his power to unleash his ultimate technique, the blow of condemnation. The Duke's eyes narrow in intense focus as he prepares to counter the priest's devastating holy power. He prepares to unleash the secret technique of House Rhineland, Meteor Sword, channeling immense power into his blade. The two cataclysmic attacks speed toward each other, destined to meet in the middle of the Grand Hall. The resulting explosion of crimson and gold energy is far greater than before, threatening to level the entire mansion. Dunkel and the surrounding knights are violently thrown back by the force of the blast. Caught in the middle of a conflict between two of the continent's strongest fighters, Klein realizes things are getting a bit too complicated. Suddenly, a small, familiar voice cuts through the chaos, yelling for them to stop. To everyone's shock, Aaron the maid dashes between the two warring titans, pleading for them to cease their destructive fight. The combatants and onlookers alike freeze, utterly stunned into silence by the maid's sudden and reckless intervention. A bewildered Dunkel can only stammer as he watches Aaron stand defiantly in the center of the battlefield. He frantically calls out to her, screaming that it's dangerous and she needs to get out of there immediately. Everyone is left wondering why on earth the maid would choose this moment to appear. Aaron ignores the chaos around her and walks straight up to a dumbfounded priest Garrison. With wide, innocent eyes, she holds out her hands and reminds the fearsome priest that he promised to give her a gift when he returned. Dunkel, Klein, and the knights can only stare in utter confusion at the surreal scene unfolding before them. As the dust from their battle settles, Aaron insistently reminds a stunned Garrison of the gift he definitely promised her. Klein marvels at her complete inability to read the room as she playfully threatens the priest with divine punishment for lying. A flustered Garrison finally relents, admitting he made a promise before handing her a box of cookies from a famous bakery. Aaron happily begins munching on a cookie, completely oblivious to the catastrophic battle she just single-handedly stopped. With literal stars in her eyes, she declares that the cookie is absolutely delicious. Curiosity piqued, she asks the priest what gift he had wanted for himself. Garrison's mood turns somber as he begins to explain that when he was young, his life was one of extreme hardship. He describes a childhood of shackled starvation where most of his friends never lived to see adulthood. In a shocking revelation, Garrison names this hellish place as the Archimad Order, stunning both Heinkel and Klein. Klein is completely baffled by this news, as he has no memory whatsoever of creating such an organization in his past life, and he racks his brain, desperately trying to figure out what on earth the Archimad Order could possibly be. Garrison declares his life's mission is to destroy the name that ruined his youth, even if it costs him his life. The fierce priest's expression softens as he turns his attention back to the innocent maid, Aaron. He hands her the rest of the cookies, asking her to please enjoy them for his sake as well, and smiles gently, explaining that providing her this small comfort is all he can do for now. His expression hardens, however, as his gaze shifts back to Duke Heinkel and young Master Klein. He departs with a final, chilling warning to the Rhinelands: next time, it won't end like this. A tense silence falls over the wrecked hall as the priest leaves and the knights slowly stand down. Klein collapses to the floor in relief, finally letting out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Panting in exhaustion and terror, he realizes he can't afford to pick a fight with Garrison a second time, and understands that his relationship with the priest has now become a deadly game of cat and mouse that will only end when one of them is dead. Just as he's processing the near-death experience, a clueless Aaron startles him by offering him a cookie. Remembering she likes strawberry cake, Klein quickly sends Aaron to the chef with a special request to get her out of his hair. A gleeful Aaron lets out a massive cheer and sprints towards the kitchens, ecstatic at the promise of eating an entire cake by herself. Klein muses on the absurdity of the situation before his father's voice cuts through his thoughts, reminding him of the next trial. Remembering he still has to face his father's pointed questions, he braces himself for another confrontation. Just then, Heinkel gravely states that they must discuss things in private. Inside, he asks him, "Have you learned necromancy?" Klein stands his ground and admits that yes, he has, but implies there's more to the story. An emotional Heinkel demands to know why his son would choose the very thing that led to his 7-year imprisonment. Thinking fast, Klein calmly lies, claiming he acquired the knowledge from his late mother Claire's annex. Heinkel is taken aback by the mention of his late wife, while Klein internally admits it's a lie, but the most plausible excuse he has. He forgoes any further excuses, stating plainly that using necromancy was his only way to survive. His father argues that his swordsmanship should have been enough, but Klein bluntly shuts him down with a simple number. He then points out that his father must have already seen the report submitted by Dunkel, and reminds Heinkel of the impossible foes he's faced, arguing that with a body devoid of magic power, mere swordsmanship would never have been enough. Klein urgently explains that the Empire is using a necromancer to undermine the North, and the family must acknowledge his own existence before it's too late. He frames his necromancy not as a disgrace, but as an extreme yet necessary measure to achieve his goal. The revival of the family, he makes a bold power move. He offers himself as House Rhineland's Necromancer and challenges his father to make his judgment. He puts the choice to Heinkel, use him to save the family or let it perish, all while daring him to truly believe he isn't Archimod's reincarnation. Heinkel listens in silence, his expression unreadable as he processes his son's audacious proposal. The dupe turns away, his mind flashing back to the day Klein first returned to the estate after his long absence. He vividly remembers how, even after 7 years locked away, his son had called him father without a single trace of resentment. The memory of his young son returning and simply saying, "I'm home, father," still weighs heavily on his heart. Klein is surprised, realizing that his father has been carrying the guilt of being a foolish father who couldn't protect his son's future all this time. Heinkel admits that after his past failures, he has neither the right nor the reason to stop Klein now. He turns back to his son, his mind finally made up. With a newfound understanding, he grants his son the freedom he desires, telling him simply, "Do as you wish." In the grand, silent hall, a new pact is forged between father and son, their future paths now intertwined. Elsewhere, a shadowy but powerful figure, Grand Duchess Hellion, decides it is finally time for her to meet Klein. She summons her subordinate, the formidable Commander Laya of the Blue Holy Spear Knights, and she gives a simple order to the commander, bring Klein to her, setting the stage for a new, powerful player to enter the game. The scene transitions to chaos as a mercenary screams while his comrades are decimated. A powerful shockwave sends bodies flying as a berserk mercenary unleashes his newfound strength. His former comrade looks on in horror, realizing their entire mercenary band doesn't stand a chance against the monster he's become, and realizes with terror that the berserker is no longer human, but a true monster. Overwhelmed by the carnage, the mercenary leader despairs, unsure of what to do. So he makes a futile, desperate charge at the rampaging beast. But the berserker effortlessly stops the charge with a brutal punch to the face. The blow sends him flying, and he collapses to the ground. Just then, a man screams and runs for his life. The berserker, however, picks up a stone. He then viciously pierces the fleeing man by hurling a stone, ending his life without a second thought. With a twisted grin, the berserker revels in the incredible power surging through his veins. A civilian woman is frozen in shock as the monster turns its attention toward her. Terrified siblings huddle together, whispering in fear as the berserker looms over them. Lifting a massive slab of stone, the monster prepares to crush the children. He sadistically tells the crying children not to worry, and mockingly promises the horrified siblings that their end will be swift. His red eyes glow with malevolent power. Just in the nick of time, Commander Laya arrives. She strikes back at the monster with her spear. After that, she kicks the stone away from the children. Turning to the frightened children, she calmly instructs them to move to a safer location. The siblings quickly agree and begin to run from the dangerous battle zone. The berserker immediately retaliates, throwing a devastating punch directly at her. But she effortlessly dodges it by leaping into the air, and prepares for the counterattack in midair. However, as she attacks, the monster blocks with his hands, but his hands are sliced by the attack. He laughs menacingly. His glowing red eye fixes on Laya as he prepares to overpower her. Acknowledging her strength, he unleashes another ferocious attack to crush her, but she manages to dodge it, and she again slices the monster's hands with her spears. She then finds an opening and prepares to turn the tables. With a powerful twist of her spear, she flings the massive berserker through the air. The monster slams hard into a nearby wall, momentarily stunned by her strength. The berserker admits her attack stung, but he's too slow to notice the magical sigil appearing before him. It is the spear hurled by Laya, aimed directly at the berserker. His eye reflects the brilliant light of the incoming attack, his confidence finally wavering. The holy spear descends, pinning the monster to the ground in a cataclysmic explosion. Defeated and impaled, the mercenary coughs up blood, his berserk rage fading. Laya lands without a sound amidst the devastation her attack caused. Her subordinate knights rush to her side, relieved that their captain is unharmed. Laya and her knight discuss the situation, noting this is the third berserker incident this month, all displaying superhuman strength. Her subordinate adds that all cases involved eyewitness accounts of strange, dark veins appearing on the body. With his dying breath, the mercenary gasps that anyone can become strong if they possess a certain mysterious item. He claims that with that, one can become even stronger than the legendary Archimod. But just then, she pulls her spear out of his body and scoffs at the claim, declaring that a mere bastard could never dream of surpassing Archimod. Still, she considers the dying mercenary's words about the mysterious item. She resolves to uncover the truth behind this power-enhancing substance for herself. Meanwhile, back at the heavily damaged Rhineland estate, a servant sweeps away rubble. Workers complain about the state of the walls, overwhelmed by the scale of the repairs needed after the Duke's clash with the priest. One worker tries to look on the bright side, suggesting it's fortunate the damage wasn't worse. His colleague smacks him, yelling, "Fortunate my ass," as he gestures to the widespread destruction, and reminds him that if Duke Heinkel hadn't stepped in, the entire estate would have been obliterated. The servants gossip, questioning the ridiculous rumor that the tiny maid Erin was the one who stopped the fight. One scoffs at the idea of a little kid having such strength, and dismisses a fleeting, strange feeling as just his imagination. Erin cheerfully calls out to her master as she enters his study. She proudly announces that she's brought the books he requested. Klein, looking dapper with a new monocle, looks up from his studies, slightly taken aback by her entrance. Erin pauses, sensing something is different about the young master. She muses aloud that he's gotten so handsome that girls will toy with him, causing Klein to ask where she's learning such things. She admits she overheard other maids discussing a romance novel, prompting an exasperated Klein to offer to read her fairy tales instead. Now enjoying his freedom a week after the destructive clash, he tells her he'll be busy for a while. A flashback shows the immense power of the confrontation between Duke Heinkel and Priest Garrison, which destroyed parts of the estate. Klein internally reflects that if Erin hadn't comically interrupted the fight, he surely would have died. As he contemplates what he's gained from the incident, Dunkel enters the room. He arrives with a cart overflowing with the medical and anatomical texts Klein had ordered. While Erin comically wails for her missing fairy tale book, Klein celebrates his newfound freedom to access knowledge. He contrasts his current situation with his past life, where he had to slave away just to learn a single spell. He even recalls the desperate schemes and chases he endured just to obtain a single torn page from a grimoire. The memories are painful, including a time he was caught stealing and nearly had his fingers blown off. He reflects on that era, where knowledge was a rare commodity reserved only for the noble and powerful. But in this new life, as a Duke's son, everything has changed, and revels in the fact that he can now acquire knowledge in any field he desires, simply by asking for it. As a true genius, he quickly absorbs the information, easily disproving a long-held hypothesis about the human body's magic system. But he is ecstatic to learn about the 200 years of new magical discoveries made since his death, a thrill he hasn't felt since being reborn. With a demonic fervor, he vows to cram all this new knowledge into his head, much to his attendants' confusion. His intense study is interrupted as his gaze falls upon a specific book. The book details the life of a legendary figure from his own family's history. He reads the name of the legendary 6th Duke, Rudel Rhineland. Dunkel, ever watchful, questions Klein's unusual interest in anatomy books and a strange diagram he's drawn. Klein casually reveals the diagram is a spiritual body construction formula, a key component of high-level necromancy. As his attendants try to parse the complex term, Klein begins to explain his ambition. He then demonstrates the formula, sprinkling a catalyst onto the magical circle, and channels his own magi into the formula to activate it. Erin watches with wide-eyed curiosity as the magic begins to work. Klein explains that his necromancy is unique as a basic skeleton rises from the activated formula. He elaborates on his method, contracting a soul and then using its own magic to construct a spiritual vessel for it. However, he clarifies that most souls cannot manifest a complex spirit vessel beyond that of a skeleton, and explains that these weaker souls lack the magic power or ego to form a complex body, resulting in a simple structure. While his skeleton army is useful for tactics, Klein admits they are no match for truly strong knights or mages. This very weakness, he concludes, is why he was forced to personally intervene and defeat Dalton. Klein then poses a tantalizing question to Dunkel and Erin: what if he used a soul that wasn't ordinary? He hypothetically asks what would happen if the soul belonged to a knight who possessed immense magic power. Dunkel stammers, asking if his young master is truly considering creating such a powerful and dangerous undead. Klein reassures him, stating that finding a soul strong enough is incredibly rare, so he doesn't plan on making one right now. However, just as Klein dismisses the idea, he is interrupted by the arrival of Butler Veerman. The butler formally announces that an urgent invitation has arrived from House Paul Wyvern. Klein immediately connects House Paul Wyvern to Commander Laya, realizing the invitation is from her family. He flashes back to her bizarre and forward proposal after their duel. While Dunkel questions why an urgent matter would be addressed to Klein instead of the Duke, our protagonist seems lost in thought. The butler hesitates before revealing the crucial detail about the sender and specifies that the invitation was sent not by Laya, but by the matriarch, Lady Helion, startling Klein. Dunkel questions the protocol, but the butler is quick to explain Lady Helion's significant political standing. Veerman clarifies that as Duke Heinkel's biological sister and the mistress of House Paul Wyvern, an invitation from her cannot be declined. Without hesitation, Klein accepts the invitation, much to Dunkel's surprise. Looking back at his spiritual construction formula, he realizes the timing is perfect and that he had no intention of creating a Death Knight until now. With a cunning smirk, he declares that this new development has given him the perfect reason to proceed with his plan after all. Later that night, he quietly passes by Erin's room, noticing she's fallen asleep while studying. Hearing her sleep talk about cookies, he smiles fondly before heading out into the night with a lantern. His destination is the tomb of his target, his grandfather, the legendary 6th Duke Rudel Rhineland. He recalls the tales of Rudel, once called the strongest knight on the continent, a tragic hero comparable only to the first Duke, Berkel. Determined to make this powerful soul his, Klein arrives at the entrance to the vast Rhineland family mausoleum. He approaches the foreboding, ancient structure that serves as the final resting place for generations of his family. He walks with purpose through the grand mausoleum, heading for a specific tomb among the many. Using his necromantic senses, he notes that the souls of his other ancestors have long since moved on. However, he detects a single, powerful soul that still has lingering attachments to the mortal world. A vibrant blue aura emanates from one sarcophagus, signaling the presence of the soul he seeks. Klein smirks, imagining how furious his father, Heinkel, would be if he knew he was about to exhume his own father's remains. Placing his lantern on the sarcophagus, he steels himself and prepares to summon the spirit of his grandfather. He begins the incantation for the exhumation, offering a wry apology to his grandfather for this unfilial behavior. Channeling his magi, he calls out to the unfortunate soul bound by the karma of life, offering to light its path with a contract. As he commands the soul to answer, the massive stone sarcophagus begins to glow and tremble violently. A booming voice demands the Necromancer show himself as a wisp of blue. Spiritual flame emerges from the tomb. Klein is stunned as the spirit effortlessly absorbs all the magi he offered, a testament to the former Duke's incredible power. His ultimate goal is a Death Knight, the highest tier undead, created by binding a powerful knight's soul to a physical form. And he knows he has two options: force the soul into submission with overwhelming power, or earn its consent and cooperation. The spirit of Rudel Rhineland fully materializes, expressing initial curiosity as to why his cute grandson would seek him out. However, holding a wisp of Klein's necromantic energy, Rudel instantly recognizes him as the Rhineland family's greatest nemesis. The legendary Duke is shocked to discover that Archimad's spirit has possessed the body of his own grandson. Klein calmly explains that since souls perceive essence, not form, he cannot hide his true identity from his ancestor. Rudel's spirit admits that the proposal to serve the family is admirable. However, as a former Duke, he questions whether he can truly trust his family's sworn enemy. A tense wave of energy erupts between the two as the spectral Duke makes his decision. A sword of pure spirit energy forms and presses against Klein's face in a clear challenge. Unintimidated, Klein grins and declares that he will prove his trustworthiness. He offers proof of his honest intentions and promises to release Rudel from the karma binding him to the world. He then asks, because for a knight, trust is not earned with words, but with the sword. The Duke's spirit scoffs at the Necromancer's audacity, calling him a bastard for prying open his own ancestor's coffin, and declares a battle of insubordination, a trial by combat to determine if Klein is worthy of his power.
Hey everyone! If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out and lets me bring you more great content. Now let's begin the story.